G'day podcasters, welcome back to Season 4 of True Blue Conversations with your host, Adam Bloom. We'd like to thank Tactical Recovery for sponsoring this show. Head on over to tacticalrecovery.com.au and use the code TRUEBLUE for one hell of a discount. Tactical Recovery, magnesium-based muscle care, salty products for sore fuckers. Welcome, loyal listeners of True Blue Conversations. Today's episode is proudly sponsored by Australian Warfighter Coffee. Veteran owned and run, driven by a simple yet powerful motto: people over profit. Every dollar goes towards supporting veterans and first responder charity groups. Head on over to AustralianWarfighters.com and use the code TRUEBLUE for your exclusive discount. Because let's face it, any other coffee is just brown sadness water. Now, let's get on with the show. Raise your glasses, podcasters. This episode of True Blue Conversations is brought to you by Wet Canteen Bottling Company, the perfect way to commemorate and celebrate life's most special occasions. Elevate your moments, savour the taste, and make them truly unforgettable with Wet Canteen. Head on over to wetcanteenbottlingco.com.au and use the code TRUEBLUE for your exclusive discount. Now, on with the show.
G'day, welcome back to True Blue Conversations. I'm Adam Bloom. Today, I'm joined by former Special Forces, 2nd Commando veteran and police veteran Murray Turner. Muzz deployed on multiple deployments to Afghanistan and East Timor, and he has joined us today to talk about his life in the Special Forces, transitioning out of defence and life after service. Hi Muzz, thanks for joining us on the show.
Hi Adam, thanks for having me up, mate. It was great to get a call and for you to reach out. And I've listened to a lot of your podcasts and they head in an awesome direction and good content. So really happy to be here, mate. Thanks for the offer.
Thanks, mate. It's an absolute honour and a privilege to have you on. So Muzz, before we get into your career in the 2nd Commando Regiment, can you tell us about a young Muzz? Where did you grow up and what was life like, and did you have any hobbies in sport, and what were you like at school?
Yeah, so I was born in Perth, but then sort of at about the 3-year-old age moved to Port Pirie, which is down near Adelaide, and spent kind of the next 10 years there. So under a single parent sort of format, and started riding motorbikes a little bit. When I was like 7, 8, 9, and become actually quite good. I looked at some photos the other day. Apparently I was state champion for when I was 12 years old, which was great to see those old photos and trophies. And then moved to Broken Hill with mum and my new stepdad. So I spent the next kind of 8 to 9 years at Broken Hill, where I did all my schooling, my high schooling anyway. So yeah, growing up pretty much in the bush. Which is great lifestyle. I love the relaxation element of being in the bush and, not having the city life and the city traffic and the city dangers, I guess.
So for you, Muzz, was it like you went okay at school? Like you weren't too bad at school, or was it?
Well, it's kind of a theme, I guess, right? From all the podcasts I listen to, all the good operators, the people that I judge as good, were absolute clusters at school, and I was definitely one of those. So I was borderline incompetence of not passing, and I picked the hardest subjects, to be honest, because I started flying when I was 16, so I wanted to become a Top Gun, Australia version of Top Gun, which meant, it didn't mean flying, but it was just interested to me, and I wanted to get in there with some street cred because I knew my marks weren't going to be that good, right? So I thought if I got some flying experience, it shows an aptitude for learning and for trying new things and the technical elements of flying and holding a license, and I thought that would get me at least in the door for when they open up the folder and look at my scores. So that's how I got into flying, and that didn't pan out, which I'm lucky and I'm grateful for. But yeah, it was a challenge. I enjoyed it, and I spent a lot of money on flying, and it got me nowhere.
So you wanted to join the Air Force, mate, as Top Gun, and I'm guessing Tom Cruise's movie was an influence.
Yeah,
or?
the mid-'80s was big on that, right? It was 86 when I started flying, exactly the year the movie came out. So, I thought I was Top Gun. I listened to Danger Zone. I still couldn't drive. I was like 15 and 16, so I still had to get a lift to the airport to be able to fly a two-seater Cessna around, which is like a little 152 Aerobat that I trained in.
Yep.
And back then it was $100 an hour, so like I was working on the weekends. So while all my mates are partying and living up year 11 and 12, I'm working at a gas station, working 12 hours on a Saturday, 12 hours on a Sunday to pay for my $100 flight lessons throughout the week. So it wasn't easy. I missed a lot of party opportunities. But it set me up for working and striving for what you want, and it doesn't come easy, and you may have to work yourself to get it right. And
sacrifice, mate. It's something that today's, and I'll say this, and it might be controversial, mate. Today's generation seem to, they want to be a CEO at 20, and they got no life experience, and they don't want to go through the journey and the process. And like yourself, when you would down the track do selection. You have to sacrifice, mate. There's a lot of sacrifices that comes, and like you say, you've got to achieve anything that you want to achieve. It comes with sacrifice.
You got to pay the life bills, I guess, right? To understand hardship for whatever's coming in the future, whether it's an apprenticeship or whether it's your job or whether it's school or college and university, all right? In my opinion, if you do the hardships, and it might start out when you're 10 doing push-ups or whatever it is, right? If life's not essentially given to you and you need to work at different components of it, you understand, you need to put in to get something back. So I think that's important.
Absolutely. And I think, mate, when you do achieve what you do set out to do, it actually, you appreciate it more because you haven't been given it. You've had to work for it. And I think there's a big difference between people that are, born with a silver spoon in their mouth and people that have to work for anything. And like I know myself, mate, and you know as well, it is that I think you enjoy the process too and the journey.
Yeah, it definitely sets you up with the skills and the ability to learn, no matter what it is, right? It could be anything, but the ability to work hard and to learn a new project, a new whatever, you got to have that background that you've put the yards in previously, so you understand nothing's just going to be given to you, and if it is, maybe it's not worth it.
Absolutely.
Like you mentioned.
Absolutely. So you did your flying, and then you were going to head down the military path, and did you? So the question is, obviously, we said at the start you went the army route, but what did you do before the military? What was was there something that you like? Was there a willingness to serve, or what?
No, not really, and that's a good question. On hindsight and looking back now, there wasn't much of an interest in the military besides the pilot element that didn't pan out, and then I thought, okay, that's scrapped. But so that's when I joined the cops. Me and the next door neighbour, he motivated me. He filled out my application form. And, I was 18 and we moved down to Goulburn and joined the academy down there and did the 6 months and then got posted. Before I knew it, before I blinked, I've done the police academy and I'm posted to Flemington in Sydney, as like an 18, 19-year-old. So I knew kind of early on, even with the aspirations of the Air Force, Top Gun and the police, looking back now, I was chasing adrenaline, I guess, right? I knew what I wanted. I wanted some kind of adrenaline rush in my life, and kudos to the plumbers and the builders and the mechanics. I wanted something different, and I just had a drive for some kind of adrenaline-driven activity in my life, and I wanted to be fulfilled through work. So that's why I thought the cops could really, scratch that itch, I guess. It didn't. After 2 years of being a cop in Sydney and driving around and doing typewriter reports, which was killing me, I realised that this kind of sucks and I wasn't enjoying it. A lot of guys, other classmates I'm still in contact with that did. But I guess I saw a lot of the mature police officers unmotivated, right? Didn't want to go to jobs, just didn't like paperwork, didn't like doing stuff that would create paperwork, so therefore they didn't take on any difficult jobs. And I really thought, fuck this. I don't want to be a cop. There was no money in it back then as well, right? In 1990 in Sydney, paying Sydney rent prices, living with 2 other cops. There was just no money. You were saving like $20 a week, if that. So I left that, to pursue another job to get me money to pursue the pilot's license a little bit more. Yeah.
So what lessons did you take away from your time though in the police that helped you? Did anything help you in your military career, or like from the police, or?
Not really. If I could put my finger on one thing, maybe it was we had the TRG back then that were what they call it, district central. So every 5 police stations, for instance, you'd be a part of a district. So Flemington on Parramatta Road there near Auburn in 1990 was like the district station. So we had the TRG element that were upstairs, and they were big guys, big unit dudes that would come in and push pig for a bit and get massive, and then go out on jobs and drop the hammer and regulate dudes back in the 1990s. And I was looking at those like they were legends. I was a skinny 18-year-old 72 kilo dude. And watching them stomp around and lifting weights and stacking their little their big four-wheel drive black cruiser thing with blacked out windows and going to jobs and dropping hammer, I thought, wow, that's awesome. I respect those guys. So that's kind of led me towards, and was a thought planted in my brain about being tactically involved in a job would be unreal and awesome, and yeah.
So you leave the police, and then in 1995 you joined the army. And did you have any family that had served in the military before you? And was, as you said, was it that adrenaline you were chasing, that adrenaline, or?
Yeah, it was then. So like I left in like 92 the police, and my good buddy that I joined with that pretty much forged my application paper. So he got in a shootout about 6 months after I left and smoked a dude. And like, he was a bad guy who just beat his wife and was then shooting at the cops with a shotgun. So my buddy slaughtered him. And then I heard about it, and it was devastating that I missed out. And he had gone toe-to-toe with a dude on the back streets of Marrickville. But I like that even more motivated me. It was like, wow, he lived through the encounter, our guy, and he tested himself both physically and mentally, I guess, right? And that even spurred me more to check that box for me, which later sort of found out that I wanted to be in combat.
Yep.
So yeah, joining the army after that, a couple of years later, was important.
Well, I think, Mars, it's a good point you touch on with a lot of the veterans that and some of your fellow mates in Commando have said combat is the real test. It's the test of character. It's that it doesn't get more real than that, and firsthand yourself. And exactly right. It's the true It's a true test, and you found that out on many deployments.
Yeah, that's right. It is it's kind of the ultimate man test that it's not everybody's up for it, and it's not suited to everybody. Everybody's got their path in life, and for me, it was I want to do that. Good, bad, or indifferent, whatever the outcome is, I want to test myself physically and mentally. So that's what drove me towards infantry to start with, and then sort of work out where I stood in the infantry, sphere, and work out what's the best road to get me to some kind of combat.
Yeah. So what do you remember of your time at Kapuka? And was it shock for you? Or
it was a shock. And of course, so this is mid-90s, and everybody's telling
no political correctness back then.
No political correctness, and everyone who did Kapuka, it was the hardest, of course, right? But mid-90s, no internet, no telephones, and you just got annihilated. Like I thought you would get annihilated, but even me, so I was 23 going through, so I kind of mentored a lot of the 18, 19-year-olds. I had a lot in my room that were all 18 and 19, so I mentored those guys just in the sense of, it's not that bad. We're all getting yelled at. It's not the end of the world. It's part of a game. Just play, and we'll all be fine. We'll march out in 3 months. So for me, it was still hard. It was still physically demanding, but I kind of enjoyed it, right? I enjoyed the OCD element of me ticking those boxes, and having everything straight and neat and charged and ready and clean and whatever. For me, that's always been a thing. So I didn't mind it, and helping other guys through was part of my nature, I guess.
And then you finish Kapooka, and then you go to your initial employment training at Singleton. And I've heard from the boys that I've had on, mate, that it's if like Kapooka's one thing, but then Singleton's a whole nother level. And what was that like? Because obviously Kapooka you're going through with cooks and drivers and all that sort of thing. Getting to Singleton, what was that like?
Yeah, and that's a good point. When you get to Singleton, it's all the hard charges, right? So everybody's been sort of dispersed to their particular cause and going to Bandiana and Victoria or wherever. But we went for infantry, obviously, to Singleton, which was actually winter time, so it was cold. It's no joke up there in winter time, kicking around and getting yelled at in your underpants and jumping in the bear pit and breaking the ice. And it seemed to rain a lot back then as well, so you're always wet and tired and hungry, and physically exhausted. So that was great. Like, your physical fitness went through the roof, but you had more time off, right? So you could sort of enjoy it, sit back and enjoy it. You had probably an hour off a day, I guess. Still, you're still getting yelled at, and you still got to do, your dry practice and strip weapons and navigation and everything else. But it was a more mature approach from the instructors. It was a learning environment.
Yep.
So I loved it. I thrived in it, I think. Yeah.
So after initial employment training, where did you post into? What battalion did you end up at?
Tuaria in Townsville. So pretty much the whole crew that I came through Kapooka and Singleton with, we all got Tuaria in A company up there. So that was handy,
yep.
Right? You take the whole crew, people people you are aware of their weaknesses, of their strengths, and you take that into a unit that didn't have a lot of hitters in it at that point in time, because they just finished 2 trips to Rwanda that they did late 94. So the unit was depleted. They got an injection of 30 younger, motivated dudes. So for them, it was a win. And for us, it was kind of a win because we were working with guys we knew. But that was different. That was hot, I
was going to say, how was it acclimatising from Singleton to bloody Townsville?
I know. It's so hot and so humid, 24/7. Right. I remember days of walking down at 0600 for a PT session, and you're just dripping by the time you get at the bottom of the stairs, and you've only been awake 10 minutes. So January, February are the worst for that, and you try and get out of town, and that's how they schedule the holidays, so everyone can just leave.
Yep.
And go to Melbourne and Adelaide and Sydney.
So, like turning the fan, like the furnace on, and just, oh Jesus, here we go. Like,
yeah, for sure.
So, what were your first initial? How were you received into the regiment when you got there?
We were received well. We had a few guys that went to Rwanda that had come back, so we got some Rwanda Warriors. We had a couple of guys that were posted to 1RAR, so they'd just got back from Somalia, 18 months before. Mm-hmm. So we got the Somalia Warriors. So that actually helped motivate a lot of us to kind of stay in the unit, right? You want to be in a unit that's at the tip of the spear and ready to be deployed. So, they had a system up there where 1 and 2RAR would rotate who was online, which meant being online was you could go at short notice, and when I'm talking short notice, for infantry, it's a couple of days.
Yeah.
You could go short notice to, somewhere up north, Indonesia, Fiji, wherever. So Fiji was kicking on sort of back then, so there was always that chance that you might go to Fiji. So you always, we had our gear ready, all our DP1 checks, all good to go with our World War II era helmets and body armour and jumpers, of course. No Gore-Tex back then.
Yeah.
There was nothing functional whatsoever in your trunk. It was all World War II, World War I stuff.
Yep.
That you dragged out, did a check, make sure it didn't have rust on it, put it back. So that was good.
What were your sergeants like? Were they pretty good and squared away with? Because for the listener who doesn't know Muzz, it was really post-Vietnam, wasn't it? That there wasn't a lot of, like, we were a peacetime army at that point. Like,
full peace.
Like you say, a couple of trips to Rwanda, a couple of trips to Somalia, but really
peacetime sort of army. So you're waiting for that. Yeah, something's going to happen. Something's going to happen. And what was that like for you? Was that, and tell me, motivation wise, was it hard to stay motivated?
Oh, really hard. And you would go back to the same platoon area to do a platoon attack every year, and then the same company area and the same battalion area. So you would go to the same piece of ground year after year and dig the same hole and, shoot the same blanks and build up training to live fire stuff year after year. And you're like, fuck, man, what am I doing? Like, please, something kick off, right?
Yep.
And the sergeants were good, but like you said, they were post-Vietnam era. They missed their gig. So it was all about picking up rubbish and staying off the grass and marching and fucking peacetime army stuff that no one likes.
Yep.
No one likes. But they got to find something to discipline you with, right? To keep you disciplined and motivated and respecting authority. So they've got to yell at you for something. And, if there's nothing operational to yell at you for, it's stupid stuff.
Yeah. So for you, obviously, frustrating. But then in 1999, you make the decision to go and go for 4RAR. I'll get that right. Commando selection. And what made you go for this? And was there a lot of talk around what the capability of commandos was when you went for it in 99?
No, yeah, so that was actually 98.
98.
98 when I did that. So I did the second of 98 selection course. The first one, we had like 5 or 6 guys from 2RAR did the course, and they come back, and the guys that were successful were being posted there, a couple of months later. So we picked their brains, as to where the unit was going, what was it like, how'd you get treated, how was selection course, of course. So that motivated a lot of us. So because the RSM at the time was a prick, to put it lightly, it was actually quite motivational for them to treat us the way they did, because it was just, let's get out of here at all costs.
Yep.
So you would train, weekends, before work, after work, to pass selections so you could pretty much leave town. Yeah.
So I want to expand on that, Muzz, because I really want to dive into... So, because, there's been a lot spoken about with selection and, getting mentally prepared. And back then, was like, because you were the second course, was there... there wasn't a lot around, was there, for you to... So how did you mentally prepare for selection?
Yeah, there wasn't a lot around, and this is, so we're talking 98, right? So the internet's not around. You can only get... bits and pieces from guys that have done the course to understand what they would have done better, or, put on more size, put on less size, go in, more cardio, more weights. You want to understand the whole geometry of that so you can prepare your body. But there was a 12-week program kicking around, so you would try and stick to that, which included a couple of 20 clickers a week, a couple of 2.4s, swimming, a lot of running. So it was more about kind of staying lean, but you wanted muscle as well. So it was a balancing act of, we had double rations allocated to us, so you could go to the mess and just scoff yourself stupid, which you would do because you knew you were going to lose weight, right? Just like a lot of the deployments later in life, you were going to lose, between 5 and 10 kilos. So you needed it to lose it. So it was all about, trying to get bigger.
Yep.
So you had at least some kind of muscle mass frame by the end of it. After your selection, yeah.
So for you, mentally, did you read up on books as well, or did you just go, all right, this is going to be tough. I'm going to be in the hurt locker here. I've just got to be as mentally prepared as I can be. What did you do around that sort of? What was there? Yeah, what was your thought process?
Yeah, so I'd read Bravo 20, which is the SAS, 22 SAS British. Invasion of Iraq in 91.
Yep.
So I'd read that book and understanding how unconventional forces, special forces worked was really appealing. Reading those books, they operated in Northern Ireland, they did the Gulf, of course. So just understanding, what you can be employed at across the whole spectrum of, operational focus was so appealing. One day you're clean shaven and you're jumping in and doing this. The other day you're growing a beard and kicking around for them, Northern Ireland. Doing some lifts and grabbing bad dudes and trying in the back of vans. So it was exciting. It was, you heard about 4AR coming on the map, like the year before in '97. And, even back then, the speak of them taking over the tag was kicking around. I remember conversation with guys in like '98, and they're talking about, Perth handing off the tag to the East Coast element. So it was like, 4AR is going to get it, which was cool and sexy, right? So it's wearing black, it's kicking around with MP5s, with awesome pistols instead of the Brownings, and, torches and night vision goggles and proper body armour and helmets. So it was easy to get motivated and thrive for something better than regular infantry 2RR stuff. And 2RR now are kicking goals, and they're awesome. But back then it was a lot of sitting around doing F all, right?
Yep. Which, and you don't, like you say, mate, and I've spoken to a few other guys from the regiment, and one Ant Plater, and he said the same thing. He said, look, I'd take nothing away from my battalion years. It set me up for who I was and what I became. And like you're saying too, you take nothing away from, but there's a difference between battalion life and SF world, and you found that out very quickly. And what do you remember of your time when you went for selection? What was the hardest part of selection for you that you can remember?
So that would have been the 30 clicker for me, which was on about maybe day 6 or 7, which is about halfway through. But actually, just prior to that, one of my good buddies, D, in Townsville, in the unit, he's like, Muzz, I can't pass my eyesight test. I'm kind of colour blind. And we were discussing options on how to get him to pass it, right? But he couldn't really. You can't just fix it overnight.
Yep.
So we worked out a scheme where, we passed the limitations, statute of limitations on this, I'm sure, where I wore his shirt that had his name on it, and I went into Townsville and did his colour-blind eyesight test for him and passed. But just prior to that, I'm trying to hit him up and say, where are you bad and where are you good? What's your strong point? Because I need to fail some shit, right? I just can't pass it.
Yeah.
But endless to say, I passed, and the woman looked at me and said, I don't know why they sent you. Your eyesight's got a lot better. You're fine. We'll tick you off. You can do Special Forces selection. So, he owes me big time. So we went and did the course. But for me, it was the 30 clicker, and you didn't know when it was going to come, right? So we did 20 clickers on our training in Townsville in the heat, in the morning and at night and throughout the night. So you want to be kind of unprepared for it, because it's such a arduous ask of your body. And we knew we were doing a 30 clicker, but you don't train for 30 clickers with 30 clickers, or you actually don't even train 20 clickers, because your body deteriorates after about an hour.
Yep.
So, throughout your training process, you're trying to keep muscle, and you're not trying to burn it and deteriorate it straight away. So for me, it was like, just suck it up. It's going to come when it comes. But what had happened is the day before, they split us up into 2 groups. So the day before, one group was doing something, and my group, which was like half the course of maybe, let's say 50 or 40 back then, we did a NAVEX. So I still had 30 kilos on my back, like 10 kilos webbing, 20 kilo pack and your rifle. And I did a 30 kilometre NAVEX on the day before, because you're trying to get as many checkpoints as you can, right?
Yep.
To give you some credit in the bank in case I fuck up later, or I fail a weapons test or something, right? So you want to do the best you can at every activity. So I got 30 clicks out, and my feet were destroyed. So now that was from 6 in the morning to 6 at night. So at 6 at night, they're like, does anybody need, medical treatment? And we're all looking around my group, and everyone's feet are peeling off and destroyed. And we're like, who knows what we're going to do later? You don't want to look like the weak guy and go up to the medical and get your feet treated. So we kind of sucked it up and did nothing. And then 3 hours later, they're like, okay, well, nobody took us up on that. And by then we'd married up with the other group.
Yep.
And they're like, okay, in an hours we're doing the 30 clicker. So now my feet are fully destroyed from 30 clicks the last 12 hours.
Yep.
And I know that it's now like midnight, right? And I'm going to start another 30 clicks with the same weight, so 30 kilos again.
Yep.
And you've got 5 hours to do it, which is a fast pace. You can't walk it. If you run it, you'll destroy your knees and your ankles. So you've got to kind of shuffle.
Yep.
And like I'd done plenty of 20, so I knew what kind of shuffle, run, format I needed to do. And I'm pretty sure we still had watches back then. You could wear a watch. So I knew my kind of splits. And we had a halfway point that you could do a split on and work out, how your timing's going. But yeah, that was hideous. That starting at midnight.
Yep.
You're tired, your feet are destroyed, and you're starting the most hardest activity you can imagine. So that was intense. And I drank a heap of water, and you couldn't have camelbacks, right? So there's no tube coming over. You just had to cluster your way through getting water bottles out without spilling them. And it's 1 a.m, 2, 3. There's no lights, and dudes are just spearing off into the bushes and losing focus and disorientated and falling over. And you help them dudes up, trying to run, trying to do some splits on. For me, it was between telegraph poles.
Yep.
So I would run between one telegraph pole to another and then shuffle the next one. You couldn't walk. You had to run or shuffle. So, yeah, I made it in 4 hours, 54 minutes with 6 minutes to spare. So I walk over the finish line at 5 in the morning, I guess, and your feet are fully destroyed. I was too scared to look at them and essentially just fell over and went to sleep with my pack still on and my webbing still on and my face planted into the dirt. And got yelled at about 2 hours later, as we're all getting yelled at.
Get up, let's go.
Yeah, get up, let's go. And then there was a lineup at that point for people getting, second skin and spray-on skin and all the rest. So I got my feet bandaged up like everybody else, by 6. And then by 7, I'm towing like a 60-kilo truck tyre up a road with a rope. So I got my pack on again, my webbing on again. I've got a rope wrapped around my whole body, and there's a 60-kilo tyre with about 10 metres of rope, and I'm dragging that up and down the road. So that was, one activity after another with no time to rest. That was just hideous.
And so for you, Muzz, did that, going through selection and obviously going on to Rio after that, did that set you up for combat later on in the future, like where you were be in Afghanistan and like, can you remember that's how the feeling was when you were in combat?
Absolutely. There's so many times in Afghanistan that I reflected back on selection and lack of food, lack of water, lack of sleep, cold, tired, hungry. All those components that you could reflect back on, and it's like, well, I've done it before.
I can do
this
it
time
again.
It's operational. I've got 4 other guys in my team that rely on me.
Yep.
Failure is literally not an option. So yeah, there was heaps of times in Afghanistan that I leaned back on that training, and was glad that I did it, and glad, more importantly, that my teammates had done it. Right. So
we're there for each other, aren't you? Like there's it's something that a normal 9-to-5 job doesn't, you don't have that camaraderie as you do with, like, you were selected with other guys that they went through the punishment as well. That's your brother beside you, and you know that he's got your back and you've got his, and it's the same for first responders as well, mate. We're the same.
Yeah.
Like when we're in that heat of that battle, it's the mate next to you. You want to get home to your family, and that's 100%. It's a great point you touch on there. And so, how many started selection with you, and how many finished?
Yeah, there was probably 120, 125, I guess, that started. And at the end of selection, there was kind of maybe 30, I guess. And then you start your other series of courses, and we lost a lot more. But yeah, probably 30 finished selection.
So, and was yours, you held rank from when you came in at battalion? Is that...
No. So we lost it all. Some people from the first course in 98 kept it.
Yep.
And I'm so glad that I lost it. Like, you reset,
Yep.
right? Your career resets, and you're a shooter, and you've got no responsibility. So you can learn all these new weapons and tactics and platforms from ground zero kind of thing, and have no expectations of manning up and being, the point guy or the team commander.
Yep.
So it's awesome to just be the grey guy and just reset and learn everything from day zero again.
Yeah, because it's that step up, isn't it?
Yeah.
From battalion to the SF
Yep.
element is totally different, and you've, like you say, fresh reset. Doesn't matter what you did in battalion life. It's mate. You're now here in Special Forces, and it's a daily renewable contract. Like what you did yesterday doesn't mean shit. It's every day you've got to be getting better and better, and I guess for you, mate, it's that adrenaline, but it's also that difference between the battalion life to the SF. That SF space. So
yeah, and to get some kind of admiration and some kind of respect within a regular unit, you have rank, right? So to work your way up to rank, you can make change, you can coordinate live fires to suit you and to better their capability. So you want to kind of go up the chain because nothing's happening in a regular unit most of the time. And to get that respect and to make change, you get rank, right? Where it's different in SF, you want to stay there as long as you can. Yep. There's many factors that dictate that. Your pay's a lot better. Operations are a lot better.
Yep.
And you've got a wider scope of doing cool shit,
yep,
so to speak.
And you're privy to more information, aren't you, in the SF world? Yep.
So the higher you go up and the faster you go up, the more you get spat out the other end, right?
Mm.
And nobody wants rank. Like all my mates, all my close guys who are hitters, none of them wanted to be promoted because they just wanted to stay in combat. And to stay in combat, you needed to be lower rank because it was kind of like a pyramid, with a major up the top and then a warrant officer, captains and sergeants. But you had plenty of positions for shooters overseas. So, going up the chain fast was unappealable because you would get out the other end. And the war for us, for instance, of course, it started in 2001.
Yep.
Who knew how long it was going to be around? But we enjoyed it. We loved going overseas. So to get rank and to have more responsibility and have a less chance of being deployed kind of sucked. Yeah,
absolutely. So you finished selection and you pass. And what company did you post into?
So I went to Charlie Company. There was only Bravo and Charlie Company at the time. And like Nick Hill, who you've had on previously, he was in Bravo Company. I was with Charlie with a bunch of guys. Most of the guys that did my course were in Charlie Company. Yep. So there was only two companies. It was on the bones of its ass, trying to generate qualified operators from the selection courses. And then, we hadn't even done CQB and roping and all that yet. Yeah.
So, and explain to me, Muzz, because that's a really key point that you touch on is in the early days, like as you say, you had Bravo and Charlie, and at first you had a lot of guys that were going through selection, weren't you? So you were still trying to get the companies up to guys that were Beret qualified.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And it was a long process. And probably some guys after like the 98 courses, maybe 99, 2000s, got through that wouldn't generally get through. We needed some manpower, and Timor was coming up as well, right? So we needed to take, pretty much a full unit to Timor. So it meant taking guys that hadn't passed selection and guys that had probably passed selection that shouldn't have passed. And that was fine. Yep. That was just part of the program to generate manpower to take overseas. But after that, we kind of cleaned house. And in 02, 03, we got good, solid dudes. And we took our time and we, were rigorous with the selection. And we got the good operators and built a solid foundation. Yeah.
And for you, because when you first joined, how long was the Rio cycle for you? Was it a long process? And obviously it's got longer now, but for you, how long was
No,
Rio?
it was like a year.
Yeah, okay.
So the whole of pretty much 99 was dedicated to roping, amphib, urban, parachute.
And at that stage, CT, did that come in later?
Yeah, that came in like 2 years later.
Yeah, right,
Yes.
okay.
So we didn't really have the CQB course that they would say now.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, right. And so you mentioned East Timor in 99, and what was your role over in East Timor?
So I didn't go. So I got married in 2000, and then left the army. My wife at the time was like, I can't do this, and I was, young. I listened to her.
Yep.
And thought, well, maybe raising a family is more important. And this is prior to 9/11, right? So
Yep.
I put my discharge in. So I'm kind of discharging when the boys are over in Timor in 2001.
Yep.
And hating it, totally hating it. And but like it all worked out. It was so unique in how that benefited me later. So I get out and we moved to the Gold Coast, and then of course 9/11 happened, and I'm up on the Gold Coast miserable as fuck, and going through divorce. It's hinging on collapsing every second. And then at one point I just came home and said, I'm going back to the unit. Like, there's a war on. I'm trained. I'm going.
Yep.
So we came back. We tried to make it work in Sydney for another 6 months, and then it went its natural way. And then I got back in 2003 and just hit the throttle for the next 10, 12 years, and it was great.
So you mentioned 9/11, and I always bring it into most of my veteran podcasts that I do is, do you remember where you were that day and what your initial thoughts were of, like, this is going to start a war, or what were your thoughts?
Yeah, like that was a couple of days before my discharge, so I couldn't rewind it, right? I couldn't reverse it.
Yep.
It was, right, you're out, Turner, and that was like a week later. So here I am watching the whole world essentially collapse on national TV in the morning, because I missed it the night before.
Yep. Went
to bed, didn't watch TV or the news, woke up to it the next morning, and went to work and was completing discharge papers and stuff, understanding the gravity of the situation and knowing that this is going to go full circle, and tomorrow and the next day people are going to be paying for this big time. I didn't grasp that Australia would get dragged into it kind of as quickly as they were, but I'm glad they did. I'm glad they raised the flag and raised their hand and said, we'll commit. So the Perth boys sent over some lads. When was that? That was still 02.
Yep.
Early 02, I believe. But yeah, that's where I was, and hating the fuck out of it that I wasn't involved or wasn't in it or wasn't even part of the team anymore, essentially.
Yep. Well, as you said, mate, you joined that was what you wanted to do. That was, like, you didn't want to sit on the sidelines and watch, like, that was what you joined the army for. You wanted that adrenaline rush and obviously, and it's not all, Muzz, firsthand, war it's not a game. It's you're playing for keeps here, and it's, you wanted to serve your country and you wanted to do your bit. And you mentioned that you got back in 2003, and obviously, so had you missed the Iraq, when the boys went to Iraq?
Yeah, they sort of they went to Iraq as I got back in, and I was real fortunate to sort of synchronise myself with the 02 selection course that were now doing their Rio. So they were doing urban.
Yep.
So I went up to Lithgow for those 3 weeks up at Lithgow. Far out, that's cold up there in the Blue Mountains where we are now, right?
Yeah, literally.
And so that was awesome to get my hand back on the tools and be current with pistol and long gun and night vision goggles and body armour and everything else. MP5s, we were kicking around back then a little bit, had some hands on the 870 shotgun. So it was good to get the hands on the tools and become current again. So then I get back to the unit, and so those guys continue their Rio, but I've done the roping, right? I've done para course and everything else. DEMS course. So for me, the next CQB course had spun up and was happening. So I knew that Charlie Company held the CT responsibility up at Luscombe Field there, and I wanted to get on that course more than anything because I'd gone back into DFSW, which is heavy weapons, walked in the office as like 5 dudes were cleaning barrels, right, of the Mag 58, and looked at me like it was Christmas because there was another guy to clean the barrels. And I kind of walked out. I didn't shoot him, which is even worse when you clean a Mag 58 barrels and you didn't shoot him.
Yep.
Walked out, walked down to the CQB cell, walked in. Kerry Danes was there, who's a legend. Walked in and pretty much said, Kerry, when's the next CQB? He says, I'm doing the manning right now on that laptop over there. He goes, what team you want to be in? I said, oh my God, I love you. This is awesome, thanks. So I was on CQB like 2 weeks later and then got posted there. So I was, in what they called back then black roll.
Yep.
Doing domestic CT like 2 weeks later, which was unreal. A whole different set of skill sets, whole different, approach, mentality, reduced notice to move, which then comes with more funding, more weapons, better night vision goggles. So it was just next level. I enjoyed it.
So for you, were you you weren't surprised, Muzz, at how quick the unit, like obviously you got out, but then were you in amazement of how the regiment kept moving forward in that short period of time, like and how like the new roles that they'd taken on, was when you got back in, was like, holy shit, this has actually happened really quick? Or
Yes is the answer for sure, absolutely, because so the first CQB course, which was in '02, the boys pretty much come back early from Timor. Nico was one of them. The boys come back early from Timor and went to Perth and just got annihilated for 6 months straight. So they did, basic CQB, they did advanced CQB, and then they did obviously driver course and explosive entry course, roping, all the components to make a CQB operator, and then the team commander positions. So we had to grow our own skill sets and operators, and more important, team commanders who could run training back in our unit in Sydney. So Nick and H and Rowan and a lot of the other key guys stayed on, luckily passed the course, from getting annihilated by the Perth guys, which worked out to be awesome.
Yep.
Because our guys really lapped it up and understood, the time component to a CT activity. So they came back, and they'd just been getting smashed for 6 to 9 months. So as they came back, all our guys who were ready to do the course understood what was required of them, and we accelerated from that point forward.
And a lot of the guys, like I spoke to Ant and a few of the other guys, and got your capability to what it is today. Like and as Nick, and rest in peace, Nick. It's you and I know him very well, and he tragically just passed recently, and it was, as he said in his podcast, because I went back and had a listen to it, and he said, mate, it was we were taking a very big responsibility off those Perth boys, and they smashed us and he said, I learn a lot from them, and like you say as well, mate, that capability was not, and now it's world renowned. Like, you guys are world renowned in that capability.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Like, even now, I've been out of the unit for 10 years. I wouldn't recognise the place as far as drills for CQB and so forth. Like, it just surpassed anything that I could possibly imagine, which is great, right? Because you want to evolve all the time, because tactics and the enemy, the way they sort of take over a stronghold and the way they shoot, they grow and learn, of course. So you want to be always on the ball and learning and getting better and, understanding your enemy. But yeah, it's a massive learning curve when you get on domestic CT. You've got to be good to go from kind of day one, right? Because you could be called out for a bus, a train, a ship, a ferry, the opera house, whatever, or a water base, ferry, oil rig.
Yep.
So you need to be competent on all those platforms
And switched on.
switched on,
yep.
Right? A reduced notice to move. You're the last call, the last phone call they make, right? They'll get the general cops who are going to be first on scene. You'll get your tactical units, and then when they can't control it or they can't resolve it,
you're the last resort, aren't you?
Last resort.
There's no failure after you guys.
That's right. So your shooting has got to be, superb. All your drills have got to be unreal. And what was even more relevant later, of course, was we all had combat experience later on.
Yeah.
So you could bring that combat experience back to the training environment within Australia.
So you'd go green roll, black roll, green roll, black roll.
Yeah, pretty much by the end, throughout like 05 through to 2013. That's kind of how it worked.
Yep.
You'd do your year overseas, which was 6 to 7 months, but you did build up, and your courses or a bit of leave, and then you did domestic CT for a year. So your skills, as well as the tempo, was through the roof. It was.
And for you, you mentioned you did 3 years on CT, and then in 2006 you got your first deployment.
First deployment.
Yeah,
better late than never.
Yeah, what was that like, mate? After almost over a decade, a little bit of a gap, but a decade, you will say, in the Defence Force. Did you think, oh shit, am I ever going to get a deployment here? Or?
Yeah, I did, but I kind of wanted to be on team, right? So I spent 3 years on team. So I was the explosive entry guy, and
Yep.
then I was a 2IC, and then I was a team commander. And I was in one of the unique teams there that did some out-of-the-box stuff. So there was some skill sets that you had that it wasn't beneficial for the unit to rotate that team commander out every year. You would want to stay there and grow your own skills and manpower. So that's kind of why I stayed there for those 3 years.
Yep.
And it was great. You could really consolidate one skill set, move to the next, consolidate, and then be the team commander. So you understood the capability of the team, and you really understood CT as a whole as well, which was awesome for me. And it culminated with the 2006 Commonwealth Games in
Yep.
Melbourne.
Yep.
Which was great. So I finished that, pretty much then went on a course, and then pretty much went to Timor.
Because at that point, too, Muzz, it wasn't. Guys were just trickle feeding into TAG, weren't they?
Yeah,
so it
they
wasn't
were.
a whole company. It was just you'd trickle a few guys in, and then guys would go back to another company, and then so. What year was it that a whole company would go on to TAG? Did that come later on?
Yeah, 2009.
Yeah, right.
So
Yeah.
up until that point, you're right. You would rotate twos and threesies on at a time. So you could risk manage the skill set deprivation, right? So, you get 3 new guys and you could rush them through different platforms.
Yep.
So they were competent. And if they weren't and a job spun up, you would leave them behind potentially, right? So you risk manage all of that until we got to 08, 09. And then it was like everybody's CQB qualified. Everybody's done all the platforms. We can rotate 60, 70 dudes at once.
Yep.
Let's start doing that because we get longevity out of the soldiers. We bring in the skills that we learn from overseas. Everybody's kind of happy. They do some black roll, some green roll stuff, some leave.
Yep.
Yeah.
So in 2006, we mentioned you got your first trip to East Timor, and you were chasing Alfredo. Is it Alfredo Renato?
Alfredo Renato.
That's it.
Yeah.
I knew I'd butcher his name, but yeah. So
Yeah.
what was your role over there, Muzz?
So we were the part of the Alfredo Renato Apprehension Task Force, but it wasn't kind of named that. We knew that's what it was, but we weren't saying that to the East Timorese government or the police or any of the officials. We were there to maintain control on the west border with Indonesia, but the real reason was we were going to apprehend him at some point on the government's orders, of course. So they went in May of 06, one of the other companies, and then I rotated in with my crew in like November 2006, and we stayed until Anzac Day 2007. So for the first couple of months, we just drove around the country in our troop carriers, and we'd pass him. So he was still there. He'd caused some trouble. And he had like about 16, 17, 18 rebels with him.
Yep.
So he had some firepower, some presence. But he was kind of fine as well. We could negotiate, we could chat with him. It's only a small country, as you understand, right?
Yep.
So as we're driving around, he's driving around with his 6, 7 cars. So we'd often meet, on one of the highways, and we'd stop and chat actually with him. I had 6 or 7 conversations with him.
Yep.
We had coffee with him a couple of times.
Was he an all right dude?
Yeah, he's good.
Yeah.
Good.
As good as they can be.
He was passionate about his country. He really was. And there was a lot of corruption over there at the time, and maybe there still is. And that's just the way some of these countries work, and that's fine. That's internal politics, nothing to do with me.
Well, you've only got to look at... Sorry to cut you off, Muzz. You only got to look at Afghanistan.
Yeah.
And how that was for you going forward. But,
That's right.
Yeah, sorry. Continue. Sorry, mate. Yeah.
So we'd catch up with him, and it wasn't until he took the ultimate step of robbing the police station down south and getting radios and body armour and more advanced weapon systems that they finally said he's got to go down. So SAS sent a crew over, and we got our other Delta Company platoon over, and they'd just done rotation 3, highly kinetic. So they're all seasoned operators after one tour because it was so dynamic, that 6-month tour. And so a lot of my mates were there, and I rotated in a Delta Company after that. So it was really good. So they rotated in. We had 2 full commando platoons and a small SAS element. So we did a job on whatever night it was in February, and I walked up We had a ground call sign walk in. We had a half helicopter assault force with a couple of Black Hawks. An Orion doing some work overhead with thermal and night vision. And we had an SAS element doing their thing. Went explosive entry at HR, which was whatever time, I can't remember, 02, 0300.
Yep.
And we accounted for 5 of their dead guys, but he got away. He slipped through the cordon, which was kind of chaotic area, as far as terrain goes. There's cliffs, it's not ideal, so it wasn't too hard for him to escape. But he escaped, and we got 5 of his buddies, and then they cleaned him up a couple of months later. But that was my first taste of combat.
Yep.
I didn't get any rounds down. We got shot at quite a bit, but they missed us, and we didn't get them. All the other teams cleaned up those 5 guys. But I enjoyed it. It was great. Like, fully exhausted. I've never been so exhausted after that, because we had 2 days of planning.
Yep.
And then we had to stomp in there, and just the adrenaline rush for all of us, I guess, right, as well as the stomp in and the 2 days of no sleep planning before that.
Yep.
I remember sitting on target afterwards, and we'd done gone over the whole scene and collected data and laptops and discs and everything else, and searched all the bodies, and then I just sat down and I instantly wanted to fall asleep. It was so hard to stay awake. But then got some good sleep for the next 2 or 3 days after that, and sort of regrouped and then rotated out.
Because was it in East Timor? Was it hot? It was.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was hot, and jungle fighting.
Jungle heat, jungle fighting. Really humid.
Yep.
So we'd drive around, and we'd drive up to the high ground to get some sleep.
Yeah, right.
So we'd be down Dili, which is so humid in January, February, December.
Yep.
And then work out that we hadn't slept in 3 days because we didn't have aircon. So we'd hop in our troop carriers and drive up to the high ground where it was 10 degrees.
Yeah.
And sleep, and it was awesome. And then come back down after a couple of days of good sleep.
Yeah, right. And then, so you come back from East Timor, and then Afghanistan's going off its head at this point, 2008, and you wanted to have a crack over there and test yourself, and did you flow on pretty quickly that you were going to deploy to Afghanistan? Yeah,
did, luckily. And I'd emailed the RSM when I was in Timor, sort of close to leaving, and I sent him an email, and I kind of remember it like it was yesterday, and I'm like, hey boss, am I going to get to Afghanistan? And his reply was, Muzz, chill out, you're on the next rotation with the guys that I'd worked with in Timor. So It worked out really well. Awesome crew. I was in Delta Company, and we did our build-up training, and then departed in early January 2008, which is the middle of winter.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
And what was that like, Muzz, your first tour, and what was it like? You'd heard boys that had come back from deployments to Afghanistan, and what was it like when you got boots on the ground and experienced it firsthand?
I just loved it. I loved every element of it. It was just operational. Everything was operational, right? There was no red tape, no convoluted processes to get a different sight for your weapon or better ammunition or whatever it was. It was just a one-step fucking process to get something. And it worked, and it was instantaneous, and it was unreal. And I love that whole, next 10 years of that, of just whatever you wanted, you got, because it was all kind of war-related, right? So it was, like an open book as far as the checkbook goes, and equipment-wise, we've just got everything we wanted. So whatever you wanted, you got. All the, your Gore-Tex and your Arc'teryx Gore-Tex stuff was just second to none. But I still remember checking my vehicle, and we had the SRVs back then, the little four-wheel drive version Land Rover things.
Yeah, the open
open air with no windows,
not much armor, not much protection.
No armor and no windows in minus 10, 15 degrees driving around.
Fuck,
was horrendous. But I still loved it because we had our pack. You had your pack on the car. You had MREs, which were your food. All the water, you had all your grenades, everything on there was just, I loved it all. It was just so cool. But I still remember after a month we hadn't had a contact.
Yeah, right.
And I remember talking to a mate of mine, and I'm like, are we going to be the first rotation with no fucking contacts? You were starting to lose it.
Yep.
Particularly hearing after rotation 3 where they just slayed so many Taliban and bad dudes. And then we've been there a month, 5 weeks, and I'm like, holy shit, we could actually. And then 5 minutes later we got shot at, so it was good. And you were kind of happy after that. You were getting shot at, so it was time to get on the tools and switch on and do the job, which was great. Because of course, fighting season, when the enemy comes out to play, is mid-year. It's in the heat. They don't want to play in the cold. So we were still pushing around in February, March, and we got quite a few decent hit-outs. A lot of contact up north, near Chora, north of Chora.
Yep.
And we accounted for a lot of bad guys up there. And then from April, it really started to pick up.
So were you pushing into Helmand at that point?
No, we weren't anywhere near Helmand, and we weren't at Shawalikot either. So we'd heard, Shawalikot would be the next area we would target, and that was like an escalation from Chora.
Yep.
And then Helmand was like, holy shit, no one goes to Helmand. The Brits are down there getting their asses handed to them all the time.
Yep.
We obviously wanted to go there, but we couldn't go there without helos. And 2008, we just didn't have them, right? So it was like, we're not driving down there. And we just heard all the stories of the Brits just getting annihilated all the time down there. So it was like, when we get a decent helo package, we'll hit Helmand.
Yep.
But it's not going to be this year, maybe not even next. And for us, it was like 2011, 2012.
Yeah, because I know a lot of the guys that I've had on said that Helmand was like their safe haven. Like they'd retreat to, and it was just a bad province. Like Nick said it himself. He goes, mate, they were just fanatical fighters down there. Like that was where they'd just pull back to, and that was their thing. And you know it, you saw it, and it was like. It was just, as Nick said, he goes, it was a place you just didn't go to. It was just, you just didn't go there.
No. And it was like the last place to go to, because it was like, by 2011, 2012, we had more helicopters, we had better assets, we had better intelligence, so we could afford to kind of poke the bear, right? Up until that point, it was like, we just don't have the infrastructure to properly clear it, and negotiate down there. So for us, it was great. We drove around, like this is 2008, we could still drive around without getting IED'd every 2 seconds.
Yep.
Up north, and we counted for a lot of bad dudes. On 2008, on Good Friday, we cleaned up 13 dudes.
Yep.
Which is really rewarding, because they killed a couple of kids in a local village to get some food. And then a predator came over the top of them, and they panicked, and they kind of ran out of the village, and all the villagers, of course, pretty much told them to F off and locked all their gates and doors.
Yep.
So the Preds following them, and they're running north, and my platoon got the call, and we were about 5 kilometres south doing a clearance, and they tell us that the Preds tracking 13 dudes, all with guns, all with heavy machine guns, tracking to the north in tactical, position. So that was like, there's somebody here. They just don't do that for anybody in that size group and with those kind of weapons and in a tactical formation. It just doesn't happen. So we knew it was somebody. So we got authority to head north. We just floored it in the cars, and we come around a corner, and they'd spaced themselves out in an ambush. And they opened up on us, and we opened up on them pretty much at the same time, and we killed 12, and we got one who hid under a rock, and we took him back. And the villagers loved us. So that's one of those good news stories where we're there for a reason, and we're not fighting locals. Yep. They can't stand the Taliban. So they were getting killed, they were getting slaughtered. If they report on the Taliban, they supported the government, they just got annihilated by the Taliban. So, they couldn't stand them. So for them to see us rock up and annihilate them was awesome for them. It was great, IO campaign win.
Yep.
So it's good to get them on side. So, next time they're going to report on the bad guys, because they know that the backups in a helicopter coming, or, you're gonna arrive in some form.
So at that point, like you mentioned that you could still drive around, and so did the IED threat sort of come in mid 2009, or it was that, and that's where it sort of changed, and the Taliban clued up to, well, yeah, we can disrupt here and put, we can put IEDs in, and then was it then after that things started to change from that point on?
Yeah, it was. It was like 2009. So we had the little Land Rovers, which couldn't take a hit whatsoever.
Yep.
And you were going to lose guys. And we didn't essentially lose anybody. We got a lot of injuries from IEDs. But then we transitioned to the Bushmasters in 2009, 2010. So you wouldn't leave base unless you're in a Bushmaster, which is great. So the government made a good call. They're like, everybody's going to be in a Bushmaster. They can take a hit. But still you're going to go out and drive around. But they could put their hand on their heart and say, we're providing the best counter IED vehicle on the planet. And we lost a lot of Bushmasters and, quite a few injuries still. But there was no deaths through IEDs at that point.
So you had no losses when you were over there in 2008, or?
No. We didn't have one vehicle hit an IED.
Right.
And that changed a year later. We hit different areas, right? So a year later we hit Shawalikot. And then the next year it was Helmand. So whether it was just the area was light on IEDs or they didn't, or the focus wasn't there. A lot of these components were coming from Iran, and they wanted to disrupt the Americans and the Brits and the Australians if they could get them. So that meant Kandahar, Bagram, and down south at Helmand.
So for you at that, what was it like for you? Now you're a team commander, and what was your, obviously team commander, you're responsible. So for people who aren't aware and how it works, is that you're a full track corporal at that stage?
No, sergeant.
Oh, you're a sergeant. Yeah, okay. So what were your day to day? Obviously you had your platoon and you were in charge of your platoon, and what was it like for you now? You'd finally got, for you, were you living what you wanted to always live and achieve?
Yeah. So that meant that I was like the second sergeant, right? Which meant that I had like half the platoon under me, and the other sergeant had half the platoon under him. So I was wheeling, like 12 guys, which was split up into 4 cars. So we could split away and chase guys independently. And you were part of the planning. So it was great. You had a lot of responsibility, and it was still a graduation, so to speak, for me, like from doing CT to being on the ground in Afghanistan, in operations, understanding how it all worked. So I was quite happy not to be the lead planner on that trip. I could still learn from that guy who'd done another trip, the previous trip in rotation 3. So that was good. You learn how to do compound clearances, how to set your cordon, how to have overwatch, how to communicate with the predators and the reapers, the UAVs that were overhead, and understand the whole battlefield and what assets were out there and what platforms you had.
So for you, Muzz, obviously, what challenges did you face on that deployment, and what did you learn about yourself that you didn't know from that first deployment to Afghanistan?
So the challenges were getting canalised in the vehicles, and you could only go in certain routes, right? So we drove through. So we had Anzac Day 2008 at TK there at the base, and then the next day on the 26th we drove out to go down south, and we drove through a village called China-Calais. And we drove through there on the 27th, and we drove through an area that there's one road in and kind of one road out, right? So it's a big mountain range, but there's a road that goes through. So back when the Russians were there, they lost like 70 armoured vehicles from the Mujahideen, who just annihilated it in an ambush on this very road. And we drove through the road, which was fine, and get through to the other side. But then we get a lot of reporting because we can listen to what they say, of course, right? So we understood that they were moving in position because they thought we were going to drive back through there. So we just had to sit there throughout the day while they moved RPG teams and heavy machine gun teams into position. And then a few hours later, we drove back through there. Just exactly what they thought we would fucking do. And so then I was the lead vehicle, and we can hear what they're saying, right? So I'm in the first vehicle, and they're like, we're going to smash them. So it's quite nerve-wracking, understanding that it's either an IED initiated, or it's going to be a lot of
ambush,
traditional ambush with a lot of machine gun fire.
And
I've got like 12 vehicles behind me, but I didn't know if I was going to drive over something, which is my big concern, or whether I was just going to get annihilated with a machine gun burst. It was on a distinct corner, like a 90-degree corner, and they waited till about the sixth vehicle got there, and then they just lit up with about 10 different positions with heavy machine guns. And we lost Jason Marks in like the first 30 seconds, and we got another 4 guys wounded.
Yep.
So we're under the pump from about 2 minutes into the battle with 4 injuries and 1 KIA. So we're putting in fire. We had Dutch Apaches.
Yep.
And they worked under a different set of engagement rules. So they needed to see the enemy firing before they would engage, right? So the Americans were different and a lot better. The Dutch couldn't see them because they were moving. The Apaches, contrary to what a lot of people think, just don't hover there. They move forward.
Yep.
So they would be in a pattern. So when they would fly over the top, the Taliban would put their weapons down and go under cover. When they'd pass overhead, they'd come up and just blast us.
Yep.
So we were trying to, regain some momentum, put in fire, try and get these Apaches to fucking shoot, but they wouldn't. So we kind of lost a lot of the initiative. The other platoon sent some Bushmasters in, and we got Jason and we got the other 4 guys who were wounded, provided emergency care to them straight away. And it's kind of drove out about an hour later under heavy fire.
Yep.
Yeah, and then we got back to base, and that was kind of my first dealing with a friendly KIA. And Jason was such a good guy, and we had a lot of discussions on that trip about this and that and his family, and it's sad to bury a guy from your platoon. But that was my first experience of that.
And it wouldn't. Yeah, unfortunately, Muzz, it wouldn't be the last mate that you would see that would die in combat. And at that point, how long were your patrols? Like, were they like 4 to 6 weeks, or?
No, we did one like 4-weeker.
Yep.
Which even reflecting on that is fucking hideous, because they know you're coming, right? They can just track you. It's not hard to track a platoon's worth of vehicles. So there's no dynamic aspect to it. You're kind of driving around, and there's a whole different kind of warfare when you're doing that. You shape them a little bit different because they talk and they hand you off to one village to the next. So you try and target the spotters and the guys with the radios. And we got ways to do a lot of that. And you got Predator and Reaper support. At night you got thermal. During the day you've got all your sensors on it that can pick up guys, and they can drop bombs on them. Or we call in Apaches, or we get snipers to take them out. But it's very hard to engage enemy when you're driving up a fucking massive valley with your vehicles.
Yep.
You haven't got this element of surprise on anybody.
Yep.
So it's not really a good way to fight a war. It's different when you haven't got helicopters. It's all you've got. So I was happy with that, right? Yep. I'm just happy to get out and get amongst it. 6 months isn't that long, and I really wanted to take it to the enemy and have some effects. So I was quite happy to drive around and cause some chaos, and if they start shooting at us, then we can drop mortars, or we can call in a pair of F-16s or something and take them out. So even though it sucked and it's not the most efficient way to fight, it's all we had at the time. We had a helicopter package, but we couldn't rely on them. They were like some CH-47, some Black Hawks, but they weren't dedicated, so we had to bid for those assets, and it wasn't that easy.
Because that came later on, didn't it? When the roles started to change, all that sort of like airspace and all that sort of stuff, that came later on in the years to come. But at that early stage, when you first deployment, no, you didn't have the support that you needed. It was like you say, going around in the old open cab. Fucking hell, mate. That's just...
With no body armour. That would hang just regular human body armour over the doors and the front in case you're in a shootout, so you could get some protection.
Yeah, right.
It was crazy.
Wild days, mate.
Yeah.
Wild days. Looking back now, like wild days. So you come back from your first trip, and obviously you get everything that you thought it would be, like taste of combat, and as you say, getting rounds shot at you, and really testing yourself, to see if you could do it, and you did. And then you come back, and then you deploy again really quickly in 2009 on a personal protection mission. What was that like for you, being not warfighting as per se?
It was awesome. So back for us, we were back on domestic CT in 2009, and that's when we were talking about before the full rotation occurred with the company.
Yep.
So we did a full handover, which was unique and kind of a first, where the whole company lined out, and we did a handover with the outgoing one, which was Charlie Company, and we all rotated in. So then we took over the PSD requirements, which was personal security details. So of course, every couple of months, particularly at Christmas and Easter time and Anzac Day, all your politicians and your Chief of Army, Air Force and Navy want to go overseas and fly around the battlefield. And, they can reshape strategic policy based on what they see and what they hear from you and, what they see on the battlefield. So, of course, it suits us to get them over there so they can ground truth and understand what's happening. But, it's also a strain on logistics as well. So I put on extra C-17s, of course, and Black Hawks and aircraft packages to get them around the battlefield, mainly Bagram, Kabul, Kandahar, and of course TK where we were.
Yep.
But they're good jobs because you'd have a platoon plus back here doing domestic CT, and you'd take over 10 guys.
Yep.
So you're back in theatre, which is awesome. You're back on the tools. You're getting good pay. You've got maybe a week in AMAB at Dubai on the way in and on the way out. So it's good.
Yep.
It keeps you current, it keeps you on the tools, and you're flying around. You're seeing the other company that's in TK. And the only downside is you got to take the politicians or the hierarchy of the military with you, which a lot of them were good.
So for you, the challenges, obviously that brings its own challenges in, you're looking after that, as we say, diplomat, and obviously different to being out fighting, but did you enjoy that challenge as well that was brought up with, looking after that diplomat?
Yeah, I loved it. Like I said, it was getting you back in country, which is all I cared about. So back with your M4 and your pistol and your night vision goggles and your time-sensitive planning and collating assets and getting helicopters, and C-17s and Hercules on standby, for the PM or whoever it was. The Chief of Defence Force, Angus Houston, I took over, and he was a really good guy. And of course, they talk to you and ask you, what's happening, what's TK like, what do you need? And you can be like, this weapon is shit, this ammunition is shit. We want better body armour, we want better helmets. For us was a big one back then.
Yep.
We want better, lighter, stronger, more capable helmets. So we managed to get those just by talking to the Angus Houston on one of the rides. Discussing how these other ones hurt like hell.
Yep.
And ineffective for 7.62 short, which were the AK. So I loved it. I loved the planning of it all and going back into Bagram, and back into Kabul.
Because how long was that deployment, Muzz?
They were like 2 weekers.
Oh, okay, yeah, right.
3 weekers.
So you're in and out, and you know, and were you at that point? Were you over there when some of the other guys were KIA at that point, or were you back here in Australia at that point?
No, I was back in Australia. So 2009, we lost Mason Edwards as part of the build-up training.
Yep.
But we didn't lose in the unit. We didn't lose any other guys in 2009. So yeah, for us, we were doing domestic CT with those PSDs built into that 12-month program.
Yeah, right. And obviously, what happened to Tomo as well over there, and Brett Till as well, and that. What was that like on the regiment? Like, you were over there when Jace was killed, and how did the unit did it just you guys to just come together and just and what's the word I'm looking for? Just like make his just go, nah, we just come together, get stronger, and just keep fighting for the boys and their memories? Or what was that like?
Yeah, it is. It kind of makes the resolve a little bit more harder, right? It kind of firms up what you're doing, and it's for real, of course, which you can kind of lose focus parts, right? It's like, it's not a game, of course, but until someone in your platoon doesn't come back and you're putting him on, a C-17, with a coffin with a flag covered over it, it's like, fuck, this is for real. And, it could be me tomorrow or the next day. It could be one of my team. So it brings an urgency to making sure you do shit right, to do those all 1% of the checks, right, to make your ammunition is good, to do the last range shoot and check your zero on your sight, to make sure your planning is spot on. You've got an alternate landing site. If the Black Hawk can't land at this point, it can land at this point, right? So it really focuses the guys to make sure that, you do everything right. So if we lose somebody, it's not because you didn't do your job or somebody else didn't do their job.
Yep.
It's like, that's nature of warfare.
And I think too, mate, like you say, you can put your best laid plans down, but you're in combat too, and there's things that are out of your control as well. Like you can do the best planning, and I know that as a firefighter, you can do the best planning and say, yep, we're gonna put a backburn in here, or we're gonna do this, and then you get a wind change, or so there's that element that you can't control as well, and that's a challenge in its own right.
Yeah, that's right. Of course, the enemy gets a say in every battle, of course, right? And all they need, and they often can't shoot for shit, which is great. Otherwise, we would have got a lot more casualties. But all they need is a lucky hit now and again, and it could take a team out of the battle. And, it means that we've now got a helicopter come in, which is vulnerable, right? You've got, your two pilots and your two crew chiefs with a couple of medical guys.
Yep.
It's probably got to support Cobra or an Apache as well. So you're putting helicopter crews in danger to extract one wounded guy. So there's a whole series of things that need to occur that can go south, right? Very easily.
And for you, so come back 2009, and then in 2010 you deploy again as a senior commander now. And what was different from you as you were a team commander, and then now you're a senior team commander? What was that like in 2010, and what was different from your 2008 deployment?
So I kind of got promoted as far as team commander positions go. So in the 2009 domestic CT response, I went to the senior team commander position, which is you're kind of responsible for a certain element of the assault.
Yep.
And then that transfers over to Afghanistan. So you're in charge of what happens on target. And your other key sergeant is kind of in charge on how we get there and how we get out. So what happens on target is you discuss that with your platoon commander, discuss what teams are going to do what, where your cut-off's going to be, where your overwatch, and all actions on the target compound. So it's great. I love it. I love the planning that went into that. How to deconflict the explosive entries to make sure, the same teams aren't going explosive entry on the same door, or opposite charges, all that's kind of stuff that, because you've done a lot of the courses and you're now a supervisor in roping and demolitions and explosive entry and this and that, you've got all the skills to deconflict and to make sure it goes smooth, and to maximise, your effect on target. So
for you, what are some of the highlights that you had from your 2010 deployment?
So 2010, so A Company had the TZAC gig earlier on that year, and that was a massive hit out for them. So that whole area around Shinatu as well was kind of key. And when we did the handover in mid-2010, I did a handover with Steve, and we did a drive around the battlefield. So I went on a patrol with like 4 or 5 of my guys. We got there early, and this is how it works. You send over kind of your key elements for, maybe 2 weeks before, so they can sort of understand the battlefield, do some handover, and go for a drive around.
Yep. So
we understood that they had that TZAC gig, and Shinatu was a hot spot, so we knew we were going to go back there. So we tooled up one day. We got helicopters for that job, and we flew in and we landed, and then nothing happened. Like daylight came, and we're just sitting there, and we're like, this town's a dud. Nothing's going to happen. But what we didn't know was the other platoon were tracking an arms sale that was happening at a village 5 kilometres away. So they're on TST, which is time-sensitive targeting, and they had the Hilo package, and they got some pings from this village. So apparently all these hitters, 13 of them, were at this village doing an arms sale. So what was unfortunate, I guess, about an arms sale is they had all the weapon systems out in the compound, discussing prices and all this sort of stuff, and how they're going to sort of kill us all. So then the platoon flew in with Black Hawks into the village, and they landed on, right, as opposed to landing off, because you lose the element of surprise.
Yep.
So they landed on, so pretty much all the Taliban reached down, grabbed the PKM or the AK-47 in front of them, and just started hosing the Apaches and the Black Hawks that came in. So we were watching all this, because this is only 5 clicks away. So me, my team are sitting on a hill with 84 rocket launchers, with heavy machine guns, waiting for our battle that didn't occur.
Yep.
Looking over, watching Black Hawks and Apaches come in, and just all hell breaking loose in this village. And everything went smooth until about 20 minutes into the firefight. So the Black Hawks stayed on target, and they often will when they've got the fuel, because if you're going to get a casualty, it's generally within the first 15 to 20 minutes.
Yep.
So they stick around for that time frame. So they were sticking around, and we could see them doing laps. And then we heard that there was, a prior one, which is the worst casualty you can get for a friendly. And then 5 minutes later, we've got another prior one. And we're like, oh, shit, And one was a head wound, and one was shot in the arm. So we knew that the Black Hawks were going to go in and get them, but then they were waiting for like a lull in the battle, right, for it to die down, because it was just chaos.
Yep.
They ended up whacking 12 guys, Taliban, gone, and we got our 2 friendly wounded in action. So they eventually went back in. They were nearly bingo on fuel, so they were nearly out of fuel, and the Apache was, going in and doing gun runs with their cannon, 30mm explosive tip rounds.
Yep.
So we found out that, a good mate of mine that got hit in the head with an explosive tip round from an Apache was being overrun by 4 Taliban, and one of the other team guys called the Apache in. So it smoked the 4 dudes, but the 4 dudes were so close to their position that one of the rounds hit the ground and exploded, and he copped some frag to his head and opened him up like a tin can.
Yep.
So they got him on the Black Hawk, which is the main concern. The other guy was an arm shot, and they got him on the Black Hawk, and they were debating, we don't have enough fuel, so they were going to head for TK.
Mm-hmm.
And they essentially ran out of fuel when they were coming in to land, so they kind of auto-rotated as they come on in, because they figured that if they met another Black Hawk out in the desert,
mm-hmm.
The time frame cross-loading was, they were going to lose him.
Yep.
And he's a good mate, so I'm glad he stuck around.
Yeah.
So they flew into TK and kind of came in and run out of juice on the pad as they brought her on in. So that was a big day, and that was the other platoon's claim for that day, and they had a great win. It took a lot of bad dudes off the planet who were somebodies, and a lot of weapon systems got blown up. But there was another day, I guess, probably the last day in 2010 on our rotation. We did a morning job. We only had 2 Black Hawks and an Apache. We did a job down south near Chena Clay, where we lost Jason Marks.
Yep.
2 years before. We hit a village down there, and we got a real bad guy's brother who had PKMs and body armour and radios and helmets and you name it. So we cleaned him up in the morning, and then we're just going to do a hot refuel back at TK, because we had a guy who was pinging further up north who was a somebody. He was like a mid-level guy.
Yep.
So he was talking to Pakistan on his SATCOM, which is a satellite phone.
Yep.
So he had a satellite phone, he had an area phone, he had a local phone, and he was coordinating fighters. So he was about 50 kilometres north. So we went back to TK, we dropped 1 Black Hawk. So my Black Hawk, so we had 3, so we dropped 1. So we had 2 Black Hawks and Apache. We got airborne, and we had a Reaper over the top of him with some Hellfire missiles.
Yep. So
we worked out he was a somebody. He had to go down. He had weapons on him. The Reaper picked it all up, and they're intercepting his calls.
Yep.
He's coordinating fighters for an attack, but we can't drop a Hellfire because he's parked next to a Coochie camp on a motorbike, and the kids are bringing him food and water. So we're just going to do laps about 20 clicks away, quite kind of low. So we had a command bird, which is a Black Hawk in front of me, which had the boss, our SIG, our JTAC,
Yep.
advanced medic,
Yep.
And then there was one assault bird, which was mine. So we had my assault team in the second Black Hawk and an Apache. So the three of us were doing a loiter.
Yep.
And we're waiting for the Hellfire to go in from the Reaper, but they were discussing the CDE, the collateral damage estimate, and they're like, we can't kill kids and we can't kill the Coochies that live in the Coochie camp that he's kind of parked next to. He's like 100 metres from.
Yep.
But there's quite a bit of splash on a Hellfire, and they didn't want anybody getting injured because it's bad PR, of course. So I knew we were going to go in. We're just waiting for that call. So the Reaper's like, I don't have a shot, can't get an authorisation to drop a Hellfire. So I just remember that being one of the coolest things I've ever heard, because I knew we were going in. So this Apache just dropped down to about 100 feet, and then the command Black Hawk and my Black Hawk, and we're just shooting up this valley for like the last 6 or 7 minutes of flight time. We're just hugging the earth and just going between the rocks. And the adrenaline, and the hairs on the back of your neck just stood up. It was like, this is cool as fuck. I love this. I'm going to miss this one day.
Yep.
But in that moment, it was like, this is the coolest job on the planet. I'm with the awesome dudes. My team is awesome. So I'm talking to Nick, who's sitting on the he had an SR-25, so he's sitting on the floor and I'm on the seat, and I'm just, as we come out of the hills into the big open dash, we could see him, and Nick picked him up straight away, and I said, if he moves, drop him. But we did like a circuit around him. So we had the command bird go to about 300 feet. We had the Apache move to like 1,000 feet, and we're all in a different axis of the rotation of doing a left-hand orbit, so we could all kind of shoot at the same time if we had to.
Yep.
And he was just sitting next to his bike, still on his sat phone to Pakistan as we come on out. And Nick had a shot if I told him. But it's like, we don't have a weapon system, and actually he's better off alive, this guy, anyway. So we're doing a lap, and as we come into land, we have brownout, of course, right? So brownout just, you can't see anything. Your rotor blades are kicking down, air kicks up the dust, and you can't see. Kind of like as you come into land. So we come into land, he waits until brownout, and nobody can see him, and he runs off. But the command bird, which is like 300 feet, they guide us on. They like Muzzy went into that Coochie tent with the black tent, with the black roof. Yep. So my whole team gets out and we just run for the tent, and it's one of those positions, one of those times, I guess, in life when, you can kind of understand what potentially is waiting in there. Like a lot of them had vests, like IED vests. Yep. So I pause outside, my whole team stacks behind me, and because I got sunnies on, so I want to get my sunglasses off because I'm going in a darkened environment. I want to be aware of what I can see because I got dust all over the sunnies. So I halt for a second, and then one of the other guys in the team just pushes straight past me and goes in. And like I was so proud of that, and it shows you the mentality of the guys that you work with, right? They'll just do anything to get in. Yep. And get the job done. Get the job done and get amongst it. So I'm like, holy shit, right? So I'm second in, and then the rest of us come in, and at that precise time, he leant down to pick up his AK. And he didn't make it. But he was a somebody. And, we tracked all his phones and his weapon systems and got all the biometrics off him. And that was a good day, good result.
Proud moment for you too. Like, you'd been training these guys. And in a sense, mate, you black roll, green roll in full effect of, we're going in. Like, this is it, and, like, that's it. And, like, as you say, like, for you going, yep, I just need to take my glasses off, and just one of your team going in. And, proud
straight
moment.
In. Yeah, I was so proud of that. It's awesome.
And like you said, and back to, I was listening to, when you were saying that, flying through the valley and going, this is what I joined up for. Yeah. This you were getting everything that you wanted, and on that trip, did you have any KIAs, or were you lucky?
No, we were lucky in 2010. We had those two injuries, and we had, I think somebody else got clipped, but it wasn't a prior one, and they kind of were operational again within a couple of weeks.
And for that, how long was that trip for you? That one?
So that was the second half of 2010. That was 6 months.
Yep. And so at that point, did the guys have the brownout and where the boys were lost, the three boys? Had that already happened, or was that?
Yes. Yep. Yeah. So that was that was in June of 2010. So that was a month before we got there.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
So those boys were hurting. Well, the whole regiment was hurting.
Yeah, they were. Yeah.
So, and obviously you were hoping, oh shit, I hope we don't have similar happen, and that. And it was the word that it come into me, galvanised. Like, of all the losses of the boys, that you served with some pretty amazing guys in the regiment, and Nick, Brett Wood, so Cam Baird. How were their losses felt in the regiment, mate? They would have been huge.
They were huge. It was a part of losing sergeants. A lot of those were sergeants, right, and high-ranking corporals. So you lost a lot of capability, as well as like a good dude, a good guy, and of course the loss is deepened by their families, and if they got kids, and you really start feeling the pain when you see the kids hurting, and the wives, and the follow-on effect. But in the scenario of the battle, it's like you can kind of relate to it, and we're in battle, we're big boys, we signed up for this. But when you see the civvy element and the wives and the kids that didn't sign up for it, miss their dad, and it's very sad, and it's kind of breaks you up when you see that element of it. Yeah.
Oh, absolutely, mate. And it was something that Ant said to me and you know it too, Mars, all too well, that freedom's not free. Like there's 41, well, I say 42 guys that, because as you mentioned, Mace was, and he's not included in that, but it was in that initial training to go on deployment again. And you're right, freedom's not free. We are so lucky in our country that guys like yourself and so many others from the regiment, and the wider, battalions and everyone that served over there, mate, that give us this freedom that I can have this conversation with you today, sitting in, beautiful, freezing Blue Mountains. But it's, that's the thing. Freedom's not free.
That's right. You can argue the net effect now of did it matter that we were there or whatever. Of course, I think about that. Once we move out, that vacuum gets, filled, of course, right? That void, gets filled. But it's, it's part of a bigger picture, in my opinion, right? It's like, there was a country in need. They stuck their hand up. We offered to help. And who knows when we're going to need their help in the future, right? So it's all about cementing those ties with other countries, being the US or the Brits, and just making it aware that you'll show up when they fucking need it.
Absolutely.
Because you hope that they will if we need it, right? So it's bigger than just the battle on that day.
100%. Yeah. And I think, too, it's a great point you touch on is that, September 2001, it changed the world. Like, it changed the world of, that day. And I remember where I was, Muzz. I was 8 years old, and I was like, "Where's Cheese TV?" Like, that's what I remember, mate. Like, and like when I saw it, I thought this is a movie. Like, and then when I saw, people jumping out of the buildings, I was like, "Oh shit, no, this is real." Like, and that human element. And, I remember when Nick said it on he goes, "Mate, I remember when JFK was shot," and he's like, and I said, "Well, mate, for me, it was 9/11, the Bali bombings, the tsunami of 2004. Like, these are life-changing events that you remember as you, and for you, when you first, like, when it happened, you didn't think that you'd be involved in when you first joined the army, it was peacetime. Like, and you did. No one was speaking of the Middle East when you first joined up in '95, and in those early years, I don't think you would have thought that it would be Australia's longest war. Like, when you first went to Afghanistan, you didn't think that I'd do multiple deployments to the Middle East. Not at all.
No, you certainly didn't. You didn't think that there'd be another war that went for 20 years, particularly in today's warfare platform capability, where Iraq 1 was over in 6 days, all right, or 2 days, whatever it was.
Yep.
So you never really expect a drawn-out, protracted war that would go for 20 years again.
Yeah.
You thought that was World War I, World War II style of fighting.
Yep.
These days it's over quick, but you know, it's the way guerrilla warfare, the way counterinsurgency works. It's a hard battle. It's a hard fight. It's hard to locate the enemy.
Well, it's a different type of warfare, isn't it? Too like it's not your conventional World War. It's not like you say. It's not like your World Wars of World War One, World War Two. You know, Korea, Vietnam. It's a different type of warfare. Like, you know, terrorism is there's no heartland. Like, you can't go and attack their country because they come from all types of countries.
Yeah.
So it's a different warfare in its own right.
Yeah, it is. You're right.
And you know, like, you guys, Afghanistan was the heart. Like, it was, you know, that was the breathing ground of, you know, what was going to happen. But yeah, you're right. There's no country that you can just go and I'm just going to just flatten them, because they come from all different countries. So, you know, yeah, very good point you touch on. So you come back from your 2010 deployment, and then do you go on to team again in 2011, or you deploy again?
No, 2011 for us was like a low-key year. I can't remember what we actually did that year. It wasn't exercises, it wasn't green roll activities. We weren't doing domestic CT. I think there was a lot of leave going on. There was a lot of courses. We ran a lot of PSD courses for operators. Yeah, so there was quite a bit of leave going on, because this is in the middle of the high tempo period. So I think they kind of realise a lot of these companies that are doing it tough and doing the hard yards overseas and really committing, when they get back, don't send them to Townsville for a week activity, you know, or Melbourne or wherever.
Yep.
So there was a lot of leave going on, which was really good.
And for you, that would have been just good to regroup and get your thoughts on what was a pretty kinetic time for you, like from, you know, like CT from 03 to, you know, 2006, then East Timor, then into, you know, your first trip, then back onto, you know, 09, then counter-terror, then, you know, then 2010. So you must have been feeling it too, mate, that you needed a break.
Oh, yeah, we were cooked totally. But it was good. Like, it was still manageable at that point. Like, I still wasn't over my head. I was still looking forward to the next trip. By that point, it's kind of like an addiction as well.
Yeah.
Like, I was fully involved in it. I loved it. I love the trips. I love looking forward to the next one. I love getting fit for the next one. You know, I was doing the Coogee Stairs. I lived at Maroubra. So I was doing the Coogee Stairs a number of times a week, and it doesn't simulate altitude. Nothing does.
Yep.
But I enjoyed being cardio fit and trying to put on some size, because I was going to lose it like everybody else did. You'd lose 6, 7, 8 kilos on a trip.
Yep.
And spend the next year trying to put it back on. You know, eating protein.
Lots of steaks.
Breakfast, dinner and lunch.
Yep.
But I really enjoyed it. I loved my single apartment at Maroubra. I was hardly ever there. And I'd drag the black bags that we had up, those Plat Attack black bags, after a trip, unload them, take them to work the next day, and it seemed like a month later I was packing them again for another trip.
Yep.
Or another PSD. But so I loved the high tempo, because I knew it wouldn't go forever, and I knew my time as you know, a junior, senior team commander or platoon sergeant wasn't going to be there forever. So I lapped it up. I enjoyed it. I lived in the moment. I just enjoyed being with the boys and training and planning.
Yep. And then, so 2012, you deploy again. And what was it? How did it change this time from when you were there in, well, your previous 2 tours?
Sure. So I guess, like, to rewind, in 2011, I did like a 4-month Kabul detachment gig. So we did a PSD there and looked after a 2-star general that we had. So every 4 months we would rotate a team of 4 guys.
Yep.
So we had 2 vehicles that we could drive. Our strategic 2-star general, who was involved in the planning cycle for Australia, around Kabul. So initially, my mate that got shot in the head with the Apache was on it, and he was getting, you know, CAT scans and all this other head thing going on. So he couldn't go, and so I put my hand up and said, "Hey, if Matt can't go, I'm quite happy to go." So a guy called Frank, who's a legend in the unit, he's like, "Muzz, you owe me, but yeah, you're on it. Have you got any issues?" I've got some dental stuff I need to get looked at. He's going, "I don't want to hear it, but all right, I'll sign you off. You can go." So I took his spot, which was like from July for 4 months in Kabul. but that's unfortunately when we lost. Prior to me going, we lost Brett Wood, which was hard because he was a good mate. And we buried him, and then I took the 4-man crew over, and we're in Kaya North there at the International Airport doing the 4-monther.
Yep.
When 3 or 4 days into that, we lost Todd Langley. So we were there more than that, maybe 2 or 3 weeks when we lost Todd. But by then, I was starting to understand that the assault company was doing DEA-style jobs, counter-narcotic jobs. So I knew the whole format of the war was kind of changing for the better. So, I was seeing what was happening with our 2-star and how the planning and the assets and the interagency stuff was working with the DEA from Kabul. So DEA had a headquarters just over the fence from us at Kaya North. So I went over there and met their air guy who was running all their aircraft. His DEA and his DEA FAST, which is their Foreign Advisory Support Team.
Yep.
And that's who they sent over to do the counter-narcotics, ideally blow up heroin drug labs. But they had a large air footprint. So they had a lot of aircraft and pilots that were all DEA. So I went and introduced myself because I knew we'd be using their assets 6 months later when I went, right?
Yep.
Again. So I went over and met him. So then when we lost Todd, how's this? Like Australia just didn't have a spare aircraft to fly our most senior general down to Todd's fucking ramp ceremony. I couldn't believe it. So the boss was like, Muzz, I need to get to TK, of course. So he's a major general. I'm like, hey, boss, we can't get an aircraft. The C-17s have been retasked. There's no C-130s available. So we're all standing around scratching our head. I'm like, let me make a call. So I called the DA guy, and he's like, yeah, Muzz, come over. So I drove over there with my team of 4, went up, saw him, shook his hand. He's like, yeah, good to see you again. What do you need? And I said, I need an aircraft. Have you got an aircraft? He's like, yeah, I've got a King Air over there. Do you want it? I'm like, can we borrow it like tomorrow for 3 days? He's like, yeah. Do you want a pilot? I'm like, yeah, I can't fly it, mate. But if you got a pilot, I'll take one. He's like, yeah, I'll see you in 3 days. Essentially, threw us the keys to this aircraft with a pilot and said, fucking come back when you come back. So I went, saw our 2-star. I'm like, yeah, we got that King Air over there whenever you want to leave, boss. He's like, how the fuck do you do that? I'm like, I don't know, but we're working with the US, we're working with the DA, fast teams. They're fucking awesome. There's, they've got an open checkbook, literally, assets and, intelligence and everything that you need on the battlefield. They've got it. And I knew we were working with them a year later, which was going to be unreal. But that was great. That got us down to TK for the ramp ceremony for Todd.
And, Muzz, I want to touch on that because I know for some listeners who might not know what a ramp like I know what it is because I've spoken to a lot of you guys and I know what the ramp service is. For you being on the ground and obviously knowing Todd and how close you were with Todd, how special? Special's not the word. How hard was it? I'll use that. How hard was it being there? And, having that ramp. And for people who aren't, can you just explain what a ramp service is?
Yeah, so the ramp service is when you do the final handover to the aircraft of the fallen guy. So you'll have a memorial service in the morning, generally at TK, that everybody attends.
Yep.
And then what's good about how it brings people together is all the Americans, the Brits, and of course all the Australians will line up the front of TK from our door, from the front gate that we man, to the aircraft. And, one of the SRVs with the 6-wheeler Land Rovers will drive out with the coffin draped in the Australian flag and will drive slowly with a team marching next to it. With it fully lined, so there's thousands of guys out there and women lined on either side, providing like a tunnel for the car to drive out to the aircraft. While the guys, the ramp ceremony guys, the commandos, will pick up the coffin and do their thing and get it on board, and we all stand there while it takes off, back to Dubai for refuel and then back to Australia.
And obviously you were in country at that point, so you obviously couldn't attend Todd's funeral back here in Australia, and that would have been hard for you because that was the last time you were going to see your mate. Like,
yeah, and it is, and they're all hard. But yeah, I know it's difficult to explain, right? When you lose dudes, and I talk to people even these days, and you speak about how before every job, for instance, when you're over there in TK, you leave a thumb drive on your pillow, and I enforce this strictly. With your last wishes, your goodbye video to your kids or your wife, any photos that you want released to the media, essentially your death photo, and you'd pick the coolest photo in your fucking photo album because you didn't want a stupid one with your beret on sideways or something, right? That people would often do, and it's like, that better not be my death photo. Here's my death photo, here's my messages, and you would leave that as an SOP on your pillow, so if you didn't come back that night, everybody knew your instructions.
Yep.
And that's a weird way to live, right? And it's even now you're trying to reflect back on that and talk to civilians and your family and cousins and stuff. You talk about leaving a thumb drive in case you got killed that day.
Yeah.
It's a weird space to think about.
I think I understand. I get it because. You know the risks, mate. You were over there. You knew the risks. Like that was your job, and it was a dangerous job. And it's I know it being a first responder too that it's what we do, Muzz, is first responders and defence force personnel. It is dangerous, mate, and you are playing for keeps. Like it's and I've had this conversation with my parents that I've said that if I was to die on the fire ground, and as tragic as it is that you've lost me, know that I die doing what I love, and that I'm helping others. And like we said before we started the podcast, mate, it's why you join. It's the willingness to serve others and give back. Exactly, it does it. So I get it, mate. As some people don't. They're like, and I get what you mean. They'd be like, "Muzz, what? Are you serious? Like, what are you talking about, mate?" Like, and I get it. I totally get it. And you weren't playing. This was for keeps. Like, you knew the risks. Like, you knew what you were doing. And same in training, and with the loss of Mason, and there's a lot of injuries because of training and because you're training like you're going to fight. Like it's there's no, so that it's muscle memory when you hit that ground. It's we're in contact. Let's go. Like So no, I get it. And that for you, like as you said earlier on, where you lost Jace, and then that was the first time you'd gone, oh shit, like I'd experienced this. And obviously, the regiment lost so many great blokes in the years to come. And for you, were you at that point, how were you mentally at that point? Like, how were you feeling at that point?
Yeah, I was still good at that point. Like, it would bring you, it was a shot in the guts for sure, right, each time.
Yep.
And, like, it was, we lost so many guys between, 07 to 2013, that you would wake up in Australia because they worked on a different time zone and you didn't know what missions the guys in country were doing, but you knew there was always a rotation of the guys from the unit over there. So, for those 6-7 years, you would wake up in the morning and check your phone because a lot of the times it was bad news, right? Lost another guy, or this guy just got clipped yesterday. And that's a crazy way to live, where you wake up, check your phone, and make sure none of your mates are dead from the previous day in Afghanistan war fighting, when you're in Maroubra, for instance.
Yep.
But, yeah, it's a crazy way to live, but it's reality.
Absolutely.
When you're in that field.
So, and for you, obviously, you're now starting, like your 2012 trip was high tempo, and the role had changed, and you were now, as you say, you were going in and you were, blowing, like, taking it to blow up the heroin and all that sort of stuff. What was that like for you? Was that a kinetic time?
Yeah, that was super kinetic. That was the best trip by far. It was like all the other trips had led us to this point in terms of escalation, right? Like I said, we went to Chura, we went to Shawalikot in 2010, but then nobody had touched Helmand until 2011. So during that 2011 trip, the other company, where Brett was and Todd, they were down there amongst it all the time. So I knew for us, hitting it at the start of 2012, it was going to be on. And we knew then how well the DEA were prepared for that. And they had a great partner force. They had awesome agents, DEA, fast agents, with a can-do attitude. Like, they're quite happy to do anything you suggested. But more importantly than that, they brought a lot of platforms. So they brought the Hueys, they brought the Mi-17s helicopters, and we got access to the Marine Air Wing, which is the Marines out of Bastion down there. So they had the tilt rotor MB-22s and the CH-53 heavy lift. So we had 4 new different styles of aircraft, helicopters, to attack Helmand with. So apart from your Black Hawks and your CH-47s, which was a standard loadout, that we would get more now, right, because the war had developed and they want to redirect assets to where we're getting results and effects. So they knew Helmand, they knew DEA with the drug labs was an important element of that. So they gave us more Black Hawks, more Chinooks. But on top of that, like, they brought the DA platforms with them. So that was awesome, dedicated air all the time. We had so many helicopters, UAVs, we didn't know what to do with them.
So at that point, Muzz, because for people who, and obviously I know certain things you can't talk about, but for people who, and you might not be able to answer this, but you may be able to answer this, was that like going in and, doing these drug labs and that, were the Taliban using the profits from that to keep feeding their training, and or what was happening at that point?
Yeah, so so early on, the standard Taliban is against drugs, right? And that reaches back to the Mujahideen days. Like, they were against it. It's not in their faith, right? So they're against it. But then, of course, they're growing heroin anyway, and heroin's been around in Afghanistan for years and years and years. So the farmers were developing it kind of anyway because it yielded a better profit than, of course, wheat and everything else. So that then when the Taliban were hard up for funding and were losing so many guys, it was an easy decision, I think, for them in like 2010, 2011 to say, you know what, let's sell this stuff. It's ridiculous prices.
It's beneficial for us.
It's so beneficial. We can get a lot more weapon systems. We can get a lot more fighters. We can get bigger, more complex IEDs to take the war to another level. So they did that. It was a total game changer. And
obviously, they get more profit. They sell it. They go on and do it. Were they more fanatical to defend these labs? And that it was a different type, more kinetic of fighting, harder fighting than what you'd been to an experience at that point?
Yeah, great question. They were, right, a lot more fanatical because they were ordered to defend the labs, and they were ordered by their mid and high level insurgent commanders from Pakistan who were under no threat, right? So that all worked out. And by 2011, 2012, all the high-level targets had either been whacked or gone to Pakistan, or the mid-level guys the same. So it was the lower-level guys and some mid-level dudes who were still in theatre coordinating assault and attacks against us. And they were ordered to protect the labs. That's our income, that's our finance. That's how we can keep buying, for instance, the carbon rod IEDs from Iran that can't be detected by the metal detectors. So for them it was important to get every crop and every cook into Europe and ultimately the US to sell to get the money. So you were not only fighting the fighters, you're fighting often the farmers, right, who were encouraged to come out with their AK and to shoot at us.
Yep.
So it actually kind of picked up in intensity with regular Afghans who wanted to fight you because you were taking their money crop away as well, which is sad because they were encouraged, if they didn't come out and fight, they would often get executed by the Taliban. So,
yeah. So they were really loss either way
Yeah,
for them.
yeah.
Like, they really didn't have a choice. Like,
Yeah.
So were you, at that point too, were you starting to use a lot more of your JTACs and that sort of stuff? Like, and from previous deployments to, like, this was now, you were doing a lot more with your JTACs?
Yeah, we were. Yep, we were. There was a lot more standoff stuff. But ultimately, to blow up the labs, they wanted a ground force, right? So it wasn't good enough just to drop a Hellfire or a 2,000 pounder. They wanted to get drug samples to understand the dynamics on the ground. So they needed a ground force, which suited us just fine because we wanted a shootout. We'd clean up the remaining Taliban and would blow up the drug labs. So for us, it was a win-win. A lot of those jobs were daytime jobs, which is a whole new different element of danger when you're flying in somewhere, without night vision goggles, without thermal, without IR.
We got your brownouts again, don't
yeah.
you, too, as you come in?
Yeah.
Like, so why was that, Muzz? What was the thought process behind that to not use your element of surprise of your night vision goggles? And because you want to make it as unfair as possible, So what was the thought process around that?
Well, the thought process was we were using Mi-17s, which were the old Russian-built helicopters, troop carriers, but they couldn't be flown at night time by the Afghanis. So they had Afghani pilots because there was a transition occurring, of course, right? So as well as handing the country back to the Afghanis with a ground course on, they were doing a pilot handover as well. So they needed to mentor the Afghani pilots. So they would have, like, for instance, 4 Mi-17s, 2 with American crews, 2 with Afghani crews. Now, they couldn't fly at night. So that's why we've got to use these assets when we have them for daylight assaults, which is dangerous, like I touched on. But, if you land far enough away or you land on and they don't have time to go kinetic, then you'll get the jump on them. Either way, we want a gunfight. We would get more of a gunfight throughout the day. And you could offset that by Predators and Reapers and Snipers and Mortars. Yep. But it is a higher risk, of course, like you've said.
So for you, obviously being senior team commander at that point, were you just that was a new element that you just had to plan for and just another challenge that you just had to overcome? Yeah,
so at that point I was the senior sergeant, so that meant I was a platoon sergeant, right? So I was more out of the tactical role. And what's good about being a platoon sergeant, you can stick your finger back into that role kind of thing and dedicate yourself to any of the assault teams, whoever's doing the most coolest shit throughout the day. Or you can sit around and have a rest, Yep. So I was kind of joint tasked with the advanced medic, right? Adam, awesome dude. So me and him were co-located together, and we would, whoever got clipped, if somebody got shot throughout the day, we would go to that call sign, provide advanced first aid, and then I'd coordinate the extraction. So you'd call in a Black Hawk, and we'd get him out of there. So I was in a whole different role, which meant that I could take my motorbike, which was a big 6-wheeler thing, on target. So I was carrying rockets, grenades, more ammunition, spare water, thermite grenades, advanced medical equipment. So that was awesome. That was a game changer. I took that on probably 50% of the jobs. Yep. So the guys could get a resupply with like charges to blow up the drug labs, which were quite heavy on your charges. So you needed to wrap det cord and a heap of other components to blow it up, and then you needed backup because it would often hit 2 drug labs. So you needed a lot of explosives. So that for me was a different role, and I enjoyed it. I'd just latch on to whatever team was going kinetic, and me and the medic would go with them. So that was so good. So
at that point, Muzz, were you, obviously you're now senior, so you're not you're not kicking the doors in like you were the previous trip. Like, you still, if you wanted to go up and kick the door in, you would, but you more the overall planning of what's going on in the teams that are taking out that role? Is that how I'm understanding?
Yes, yeah. So for me, it was a time to take a back step and to mentor, I guess, like the junior sergeants who are now in these key positions, and to let them have their war, right? To slip on out and be the logistical element, so to speak, and provide first aid. And mentor those guys and answer their questions and just guide them. But I was so fortunate. My senior corporals and sergeants were all over it, right?
Yep.
So I didn't have to do much mentoring at all. They were killing it.
Yeah. So that's a good. It's a good, and because you're like your team commanders, your senior team. So they're like corporals, sergeants, and then obviously up to, and so that like. And they'd go, like you say, like we said earlier on, that they were going, so green roll, black roll, green roll, black roll, and the experience of both, that it was, all right, one year we're on CT duty, the next minute we're in green rolls, and was that finally good to see that all the training was led to that point?
Absolutely, and it did, right? All the TTPs and SOPs and equipment was merging together. So whatever you're using domestically in Australia was often now the ammunition or the weapon systems we were using overseas.
Yep.
So it was all relevant, and it was all new, right? And like I said before, because CT in Australia is a high profile, what do you say, job, because you're on reduced notice to move. Once you get a call out, you can't be asking for this and asking for that and complaining about this and that. So you pretty much got whatever you wanted. And of course, the war was in full swing as well. So that just transferred straight over to your deployments to Afghanistan. You know, if we need this for the next tour, we got it, whether it was new explosives or a new initiators for the explosives, we got it all.
Yeah, right. And obviously, like high, as we said throughout, high tempo. But each year that you went back, was the tempo was getting more and more kinetic as you were, and as you alluded to earlier, that everything was building up to that. 2012. You kicking in the doors and doing the fighting in the drug labs and everything. But had you noticed the tempo was getting more and more like higher?
Yeah, and I don't think that was coincidental. I think it was just the way Australia strategically picked their target areas. It was Chora first up north, which they still had hardened warriors, fighters, and there were still overseas foreign fighters coming in, but you didn't have the hardcore fanatical element that you had at Helmand, and even Shawalikot down south near Kandahar was kind of the next step, and that's where we hit on the next rotation.
Yep.
And then that set us up well for seasoned guys, seasoned warriors, knew what a battle was all about. So by the time we hit Helmand in 2012, we had our shit together, and the guys knew how to play. And
for you, obviously, proud moment for you watching so many young guys come through from the Rio cycle, and then getting there. This is what we do, boys. The new guys would hear the stories of the guys that had kept coming back. But then for them proud moment for you to, see some of the guys that you'd seen on Rio and then go in and get some, hard fighting and proud, obviously proud for you.
Oh, absolutely. You're right. I'd seen these guys, mentored them, had them in my team. And to see them, doing the planning and understanding the battlefield and coordinating assets, calling in fast movers or Apaches and, taking dudes out, is great to watch, and to see the accumulation of the last 5 to 10 years of training coming together in one day or a week or over the 6-month period is awesome.
So for you, Muzz, when you joined back in 98, did you think that the regiment would get to the capabilities that it got to and so quick over that period of time? Did you ever think that it would get to that point?
No, I didn't really think it would. I hoped it would, but I'd seen enough of the regular army up until that point where it was a peacetime army, so I was very apprehensive that we would kickstart some good capability, fast, to meet the challenges of Afghanistan.
Yeah,
for sure. But we did.
because they really had you had your direct scheme, didn't you, as well? So you actually had guys that were total civvies come in and how was that moulding into the regiment? Was that good?
That was awesome. They were some of the best soldiers, and I think because of the way they approached it and how they targeted the direct entry scheme guys, we would traditionally go for the older, more mature, better blue collar worker kind of dude, right? So we're not going to go for your college student potentially.
Yep.
You're going to go for your blue collar plumber.
Yep.
That's
Carpentry,
done his apprenticeships, can communicate with people, is not under the pump when a bit of pressure is in front of him, can handle himself, can talk himself out of a situation, can de-escalate or escalate, at will, and can plan, So I love that program. I think it really worked well. It's still in force today. I think it's a great way to handpick dudes and then not send them to regular army units where maybe they lose motivation and lose some direction.
Mm. So for you, Muzz, as a senior team commander, how did you deal with, there's a lot of testosterone, there's a lot of, ego attached to being, how did you handle that? Or was it a little bit easy because obviously, as you said, it's not battalion life. It's everyone wants to be there for the right reasons. But how you still have those? How did you deal with that?
We were fortunate. We didn't really have, and every company's different, right? It's a whole different dynamic with A, B, C, and D company. And I was in Delta. Every company's got their own little nuances and personalities. So it is there. Delta company really didn't have a motivational problem. We didn't have a testosterone driven focus where we just want to slay dudes for the sake of it. We were very measured. We had maturity. We had guys that had done that rotation 3 and seen what full combat was all about and could apply a more professional and mature attitude to a gunfight instead of just like spray and pray kind of thing, right? So for some reason, we never had that problem in Delta Company. All our guys, were measured, and we had good mentors, and that's important, right? So you've got good sergeants to pass on good skills and drills to your corporals, and they pass it on themselves.
Yep.
All you need is a couple of negative or over-the-top sergeants in key positions, and it can fully change the whole dynamic in a company.
Oh, 100%.
Yeah.
And negativity, mate. It's a really, it's really great to be around positive. Like, positivity is great, but if you've got just that 1 ounce of negativity, holy crap! It's like we've all seen it. Muzz, we've all seen it where you've got it where you go, oh, fuck, this bloke's, fuck, all he does is negative. And I know myself from my own personal, where I was, and, you and I have spoken off air about, my challenges, and I was that person, mate. I was that negative person that had that negative outlook on life, and, and now I'm positive about life, and negativity, I don't want anything to do with it. I love positive, like-minded people that are, driven, got goals, want to achieve things. Mate, I don't want anything to do with the negativity. And 100% you're right. If you got that negative, guy that's maybe been around a little bit too long and, getting a bit long in the tooth and needs to push on, 100%. So for you, how long was that? How long was your 2012 trip? Was that another 8 months? Or?
Yeah, it's 7 months. Yeah, so that was the first half of 2012.
Yep. And then you come back, and then do you have a bit of leave after that point, or what happens after that?
Yeah, so we got the. I went to the US for like a month. The guy that previously got shot in the head by the Apache, about halfway through the 2012 trip, I'm like, man, I'm going to the US. He's like, I'm coming, let's go. So we planned our US trip in like August.
Yep.
And what was fortunate about that was because we worked with the DA that whole trip, we struck up a lot of friendships with the DA guys. So I caught up with like 5 or 6 of them. when I did that August trip for that month. We went to a couple of NASCAR races. We went to Chicago, New York, and just fully tied one on for a month. And it was such a great trip. It was cool to get around and see different parts of the US. You could decompress a little bit, right?
Yep.
And like I had a couple of red wine muzz nights, that's my downfall, red wine. And we had a night in Chicago where, a week before I'm in Afghanistan amongst it, and then a week later I'm smashing red wine at a bar in Chicago, and he said something to me, and I said, I had a negative result to his statement, which was bad. It was all on me. But I guess it just goes to show that you need to decompress properly, and you maybe don't go to a nightclub in New York a week after you're amongst it in Afghanistan.
Yeah, that adds another element, doesn't it? Like, hang on, I'm in the US, and a week ago I was getting shot at. And was that obviously at that point? Mentally, you were still okay? Like you?
Yeah. Mentally, I was okay. I saw the writing on the wall as far as I'd dodged promotions my whole fucking career.
Yep.
And because I'd dodged promotions, I'd managed to go to Afghanistan in a senior team commander, in a junior team commander, and then a platoon sergeant role. Where if I'd been promoted, those positions become less and less overseas, of course, right?
Yep.
So I didn't want to be promoted, and I'd done really well to fucking make it that far without doing my warrant officers courses. So they wanted me for that, and each RSM comes in for 2 years into the unit, and they're like, Muzz, you need to do your CSM course. I'm like, yeah. 2 years later, he leaves, right? So I'm like, fucking, I'll start again with the next one.
Yeah.
And then after a year, he's like, Muzz, you should do your... Yeah, I'll do it after the next trip. Because I just enjoy going overseas, and I knew that would stop when they put me on a 4-month fucking promotion course and then ultimately promote me, and I'd go to a training role or a staff role where I'm on a computer, doing computer drop boxes, and all this shit that I was avoiding like the plague. And I'd done it well up until that point. But I knew, I was starting to feel cooked after 2012, and we're on domestic CT for 2013.
Yep.
And I could start to feel it then. I'm like, you know what? I need a change. I was kind of selfish in the Army. I was thinking back to that adrenaline element for me. I was in it for me. It was great to serve my country. And to dual hat it, serve my country and tick that box for me for what I want out of life and to test myself. But ultimately, that came first. I thought what I was doing was noble, and I enjoyed it going overseas. So I had no issues in avoiding giving back to the Army in a training environment and being in a staff position. Fuck them. I didn't join the Army for that. While the war's on, I'm in a key position, and I'm giving and I'm passing skills and everything over to a junior guy. So I had no issues in that. But when the war for Delta Company was over in 2013, I thought, fuck, I can't do the typewriter stuff.
Yep.
I can't. I could do the planning if the war was still on, because you're planning helicopters and ammunition and body armor and helmets. But when it was over, it was like, no way, because you could see the red tape was on the wall, right? And governance and risk management policies coming left, right, and centre. So for me, it was like, I'm out of here and I'll go to the UAE.
So at that point, Muzz, I want to touch on that, because as quick as it seemed to be, as you say, it was a long time getting us into the fight. 2005 was the first time that 2 Commando went in, and then it was a high tempo after that. But as it was winding down, was it almost like the tap was just turned off, like at that last part in 2013, or what? Yeah, what was that like?
Yeah, it kind of was. We knew that our rotation cycle for us, what was it? So we were there, come out mid-2012, that we would go in again not until mid-14, and we knew that wasn't going to happen. So Delta Company knew at the end of our 2012 gig, that's it. We knew the writing on the wall was, 13 may go ahead, with a rotation or two, but definitely not 2014.
Yep.
So we could see that was it for us. So I got in early and applied for a job in the UAE, which a couple of my buddies were doing the hiring and the firing, and were talking with the UAE instructors, so they put my name forward. I was fortunate to get a job late in 2014.
Yep.
So I just killed some time in 2014 doing long service leave and taking regular holidays, and it got me through to like a week I had in transition when I was unemployed, and went over to the UAE in December.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
So in that time, mate, we mentioned some of the great guys that you worked with, like Todd, Brett, Mace, so many of these other guys, Jace, and mate, Cam Baird. What was your interaction with Cam throughout the years, and how did his death affect you when you found out that he was killed in 2013?
It was hideous. It was horrendous news to get, of course. And to be honest, like I really didn't know Cam that well. Like we'd had moments in passing, of course, but during those high tempo periods, you wouldn't see guys in other companies unless you did an actual handover with that crew.
Yep.
Besides domestic CT, taking holidays on a course, doing build up, and then deployed. Unless you had a couple of day changeover at AMAB in Dubai,
yep,
or particularly your guy was doing a handover to you in country, then you often wouldn't see a lot of guys because you were really busy when you got to Afghanistan. You might have 2 or 3 days with the outgoing crew to do a handover,
yep,
and you've got a million appointments with a million things you need to organise to get information. So sitting down and having a chinwag with one of the guys,
yep,
really wasn't a thing. So I didn't have a lot of conversations with Cam, but what was funny and what was awesome was at the end of 2012, me and the guy that got hit with the Apache round caught up with Bravo Company guys that were down at the Rocks, and I knew Cam was down there.
Yep.
And so I wanted to say, good luck on your trip for 2013. So me and my buddy went down to, I forget what bar it was, down at the Rocks. So they were a Bravo Company, all guys getting together to celebrate, one last hurrah before they go overseas.
Yep.
So they were a tight-knit crew, just like we were.
Yep.
So they were all on it, and they're pretty fucking drunk. So we get down there, and we're high-fiving all the boys and, saying g'day and have a good trip. And Cam was plastered, and the last thing I remember was chatting with him, put my arm around him, and he's like, Muzz, I'm now doing a chin-up contest. Get out of the way. So the last time I saw Cam was I'm walking out of the bar as he's got like an overhead wooden rafter thing in a bar down at Rocks doing chin-ups with somebody else that was in the contest with him. And it's like, you guys are fucking crazy. We're out of here. And we walked out, and that's the last time I saw him. But, a warrior to the end, right? Even like I'm boozed up, and he could still do more chin-ups or push-ups than all of us put together. He's a fucking legend, like such a good guy, and a big dude, like a stature of him. It was impressive. And he was, like, I consider one of the younger guys, like got to the unit early on in like 2000, but still had a presence about him, right? He was calm under pressure. You could put the pressure on him, even through the selection course. And when I did their build-up training, so they could become commandos and do selection, we did build-up for selection. I remember Cam on that. And nothing fazed him, right? He was just an old soul in a younger guy.
Yep.
But a big dude who could just drop you in a heartbeat. And obviously do chin-ups all fucking night.
And, like, obviously, he was awarded the Victoria Cross and Medal for Gallantry in his first, 2007, and when Luke Wolseley was killed, and yeah, I know Nick and Cam were really close, and I had a chat to Nick about Cam, and also I had the privilege of interviewing Cam's dad, Doug, and that was. Mate, that was a little bit of background. That was how I ended up getting Nick on the podcast, mate. That was so Nick had listened to that podcast, and he said the way that you handled, the memory of Cam and the way you respected Doug. That was how. And Nick, mate, and it leads me into with Nick. It's a really great pointing into Nick. That was how I got in. Nick opened the door for me to speak to a lot of you guys.
Right.
And for you, what memories do you have of Nick? And obviously, tragically, Nick was killed in the US in a couple of months ago. What memories do you have serving alongside Nick?
So Nick was in the unit when I got there when I did selection in 1998. So he did the first one of 1998. So he was also tasked with one of the first crew to go over and do that CQB course. So he was did the team commanders course. So by the time he came back, him, H, Rowan, a few of the other guys, Dusty, they were all sort of tooled up with all the skills to teach the rest of us. So then when I got first on team on domestic CT in 03, he was in a key planning role within Land Assault Platoon, and he was perfect in that role because it was a time sensitive targeting role. So we would get to a scenario and he would be the senior guy there for that particular element of it. So he would have to coordinate the Black Hawks, the engineers, the dogs, the police snipers, and coordinate a big handover that would take place. And he's fucking all over it, right? He's calm under pressure. He could deliver orders and get that time-sensitive piece out to us so we understood our jobs within a very short period of time when we got to an incident site. So I respected how he could be calm under pressure, give out stern, firm orders, and yet, still be funny at the same time. And he's like one of probably two guys on the planet that I've met that could have a 5-word sentence, and 4 of those words would be fuck.
Yeah, he did. He
loved
to throw that down.
He loved it. He loved it. So I did the handover with him when he finished up in January of 2012. So when I rotated in for my last job, I was wearing a few hats. I was a platoon sergeant. I was a platoon commander. I was like the senior planning role because there was a bit of a fuck up and all our planning guys didn't get over there, as early as they should have. So I got there early. So Nick did a handover with me. He took me down the flight line to do the aircraft handover. So I met all the pilots and the planning staff for the air packet that we had for our gig.
Yep.
As well as meeting all the DA guys. So he introduced me to the DA team that we had there at the time. We flew down to Kandahar, met them and did a handover. Nick was there the whole time. And then, with the air crews that were in TK. So I got to hang out with him for a week. And it was good. We talked about the old days of being on tag together and how, he was in that role when I was a junior guy. And like he ran a roping serial for us. I've still got a good photo of it. I'll send it to you. It's a great photo of him yelling at us at the Redfern Fire Tower.
Yep.
As we're doing some roping practice off there, doing like a 5-man explosive entry training serial. And Nick's up there, and in the photo he's pointing at us, yelling at us with Nick's voice. But it's a classic photo. I'll send it up to you.
Yeah, awesome, mate. Awesome. And yeah, and obviously, you would have been a shock that, how he passed and but I think, Muzz, we can all, and through all what you've been through and what you've seen, and it's you sort of become accustomed to all the guys that you lost in that theatre of war, but it was just a shock that but he went out the way he on his motorbike, surrounded by his brothers. That was the way, and like you say, Cam, warrior to the end, Nick, warrior to the end. He went out the way that he would have wanted to go out.
And you're right. There's an element of that that's sort of, I don't think it's sadistic, but I think it's like warriors want to go out doing warrior shit, and I'm the same. I don't want to die of ass cancer at 89, right? So I'm looking for a way out that's going to be cool. Who knows what that's going to be, but yeah, I know. And it's like it's just cliche, but you say all the good guys are taken early, and it legitimately seems that way. It's like your good warriors and your shooters are taken away from us, whether it's in warfare or whether it's, in Nick's case, overseas on a Harley Davidson, right? You lose the good guys. It's how it seems to work.
Yeah, Yeah, absolutely, and doesn't make it any easier for the guys that are, you know, and the family and friends who are left behind. But I think you can take some. I know I can, mate. Speaking from my own, I can take some. I can take peace that he went out the way he wanted to go out, and you know, on his bike, and yeah, like you say, mate. Sometimes, yeah, it's a good point you touch on, Muzz, that. Yeah, it seems that the good do die young. They really, you know, Cam, Mace, so many of the guys that you serve with in the regiment and in life, mate, it really is. You great point you touch on.
Yeah,
absolutely.
yeah.
Absolutely. So, and we'll get back to, 2014 you discharge, and what was that like for you, mate? After all, you know, you joined in 95, and then, you know, in 2014, you call time on your career. Like, what was that like? Obviously, you'd lined up your job in overseas, but was it hard walking away? Or
Yeah, it was. It was really hard. Like that'd been your existence for 20 years, so it's time sensitive planning. It's getting to work on time. It's having your kit organised. It's having your assault bag ready. So to go from that to full Civvy Street, which was essentially what I was doing, although, you know, I'm still going to the UAE. I'm training their SF guys, but you're losing all your brotherhood, the guys that you've worked with and deployed with and fought with, and some of them died with. You're losing all that. So there was an element of it that I couldn't understand and I didn't like, but there was also part of me that was like totally done in the unit and was like, fuck, I need a break, I need a rest.
Yep.
I'm totally cooked. I need to get out of the country. So the UAE job come up at the right time where it was like, you know, I can kick back on a beach in Abu Dhabi and train their SF guys, you know, pistol, night vision, explosive entry, whatever. I can do it with my eyes closed. I enjoy it.
Yep.
It's going to be easy because I know the tempo over there. I can sit back on a beach and fucking drink margaritas. And so I did that for the next 5 years.
And did that bring its own challenges in? And obviously you mentioned, you know, you're in Civvy Street now and you're training there. Was it frustrating at the difference in, like, the, you know, you took it seriously when you're in the regiment to being, oh, fuck, here we go. Like, how was that for you? Was that a challenge?
Yeah, it was a challenge. You know, in any army that wasn't the 2 Commando Regiment was going to be a change for me and not necessarily for the best, because I was used to that professionalism and brotherhood and the whole way that they would focus and approach a problem or a war or a domestic CT incident. And, you know, anything that was different than that for me was going to be a challenge. So over there it was.
Yep.
And I got through 5 years, but that was enough for me. I was quite happy to call it quits and come back after that amount of time over there. And to be honest, like I'm happy if I never see another pistol, M4 or night vision goggle for the rest of my life, because that's what I taught those guys for 5 years.
Yep.
And like I'd done that for CT, and for me now, I'm just happy to sit on a hill and drink my cup of tea and look at the cattle and the fucking trees.
And enjoy, you know. And, mate, you've earned that. And so you come back, so you did 5 years and you come back and then we hit COVID. And how was that for you? Like, how... Are you a guy that's comfortable, you know, being in your own space now and like, you know, with lockdowns and how was that for you?
That was challenging, but like, to be honest, like I'm quite happy not to mix with humans anymore anyway. Right. So
some of them are weird, mate.
Yeah, they are. So for me, it was actually it was easy. I didn't like being told what to do.
Yep.
Like, don't get me wrong, I don't like that element of being dictated by a government or you know, a bunch of politicians on fucking what's right and what's wrong and masks and all that. We won't even touch that.
Yeah.
But I don't like being told don't go here, even though I didn't plan on going there anyway.
Yeah.
It's not the point. So that was challenging. But you know, I come back and me and my fiance moved in together, and we did the long distance thing for a couple of years.
Yep.
But it was awesome to come back and be with her and fully ground myself back in Australia. So the COVID thing was like a small speed bump on the road, really, to be honest. And then we moved down to Wollongong and essentially living happily ever after down there. So she's working from home. I've really fallen on my feet there. She's a fucking 10 out of 10.
Yep.
She's smart. She's beautiful. She speaks 4 different languages fluently. Right. So I'm well above my pay grade on this, right? And I appreciate it. And, so it's interesting hanging out with her. So I'm really lucky in that sense. And, I've got a great little stepson and he's awesome. So as far as COVID, it was whatever for a couple of years. But life's great now.
So what are you doing now? Like, what do you do with your time now that you, as you say, you watch and enjoy the cows?
Yep.
And so what are you doing with yourself?
So she's working from home. She's in the corporate machine, so earning good money doing that. So we've rented some property on a mate's bigger property.
Yep.
And he's got dozers and skid steers. I've learned what they are. It's like a bobcat with a tank.
Now you're talking mate, I did that for 10 years.
Right.
So yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about.
I fucking love it. So I kick around for him just doing shit.
Yep.
Like moving cows around and digging holes and moving fence posts and doing whatever. But we fix our little place up because we built a cottage.
Yep.
So I'm always doing something of that, right?
Yep.
Which is great because I'm learning how to be an electrician. I've nearly burnt the house down 4 times. Close calls, real close calls. So I bought fire extinguishers and put them in every room. But I'm increasing my skill sets by learning how to concrete and be a plumber and do whatever.
Yep.
But it's great. So I'm still hands-on. I'm still tactically doing stuff, right?
Yep.
I'll never be somebody that does spreadsheets or can get on the market and, and buy and sell shares or whatever.
Yep.
I still need to do stuff with my hands. So the owner of the property is awesome. His family are unreal. And I can pop down there and borrow his drills and kick around in his dozer, 13-ton Komatsu dozer, moving shit around.
Yep.
So it's a great atmosphere for me. I can really relax and just enjoy life and get some stuff done.
And mate, you've earned that time, like the young days of, blowing shit up and doing, you've earned that, mate. You've earned that right to, enjoy that part of your, the next part of your life. And I understand, mate, that you're actually in the process of writing a book. And can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah. Yep. So, my JTAC, well, I say my JTAC, our JTAC for the last 2 trips was an Air Force guy who was attached to Commando. So that was Troy Knight, awesome guy. So he wrote a book.
Yep.
I did 2 rotations with him, and it was so good to have him embedded in the platoon. Solid dude, friendly guy, happy-go-lucky, and yet can drop bombs on bad guys and fucking send them to Mars, right?
Yep. A previous guest, mate, on the podcast. Yeah. Yep.
Awesome under pressure. So being a JTAC overseas, such a convoluted and complex job. I'm blowing up his ass at the moment. This is leading somewhere. But he could, deal with insertion for us, deal with a medevac if we've got a guy shot, deal with UAVs with the Pred or a Rooper, talk about our extraction that night, deconflict 5 or 6 different helicopters, F-15s, fucking you name it, right? So he wrote a book a couple of years ago, and he's like, Mars, can you put some words together for a chapter or something? And I'm like, mate, I'll write a couple of chapters, use what you see fit, and what's going to enhance your book. I don't know which direction your book's going, but here's 5 chapters and do with them as you see fit.
Yep.
So he utilised 2 and the foreword for his book, which is called Havoc 06. Awesome book. So I was happy doing that, and something I'd never thought I would do or be half decent at.
Yep.
So 2 chapters and the foreword went in his book, so that left me with 6 or 7 chapters that never went anywhere. So I got speaking to his publishing company, and they're like, hey, there's something here. If you want to write some more, let us know, and we might be able to, get a project together.
Yep.
So I'm in the process now of doing another 10 or 12 chapters. So the answer is yes. I'm writing something. Hopefully it materialises into a book.
Yep.
I don't know which direction it's going to go, so I just plan it essentially on all my rotations, a lot of what we've spoken about tonight.
Yep.
A lot of it based on the 2012, which is different and kind of sexy in the sense of dealing with and blowing up drug labs, taking the remainder Taliban off the planet, getting the chemists, stopping the drugs hitting Europe and the US. So there's a different element to it that's not just a traditional door kicker, shot a guy on a Facebook, which are out there. So I don't know what I'm going to call it, but yeah, hopefully by this time next year there's those finished chapters and we'll see what it all comes together.
Yeah, awesome. And mate, I guess for you, has it been a cathartic process too, and getting your story down on paper?
Yeah, it is, and it keeps me in that loop, right? Like I still, as much as I hacked on it and said I don't want to see any more pistols or long guns or night vision, it's still, like I still love it. I still love talking about it. I still get goosebumps when I, discuss some of those jobs and what we did and what we achieved, and, the camaraderie and the mateship and the assets and what Australia did during that time frame still impresses me. So I still love thinking about it and being in that sphere.
Yep.
Like I can't do it anymore, so what's the next best thing? Like talking about it and reflecting. So I love it. I love it. So it is being cathartic, to answer your question, and to still be relevant in the warfighter, game, so to speak. So I plan on doing exactly what Troy did to me and reaching out to a sniper and another soldier and asking there for their experience on different jobs and, what they did right and some lessons learned to give another angle that I think would enhance the book.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, mate, it's great to, as you say, it's a cathartic process to sit down and write, and do these podcasts, mate, and, share the memories of, Nick and Brett and so many, and Todd and so many of the other guys that were lost that, and like, I think, mate, it's great that you guys are now coming out and sharing your stories, because we made that mistake in World War One, World War Two, and Korea, Malaya, all Vietnam to a point as well, that we lose them, mate. When they're gone forever. And recently losing Nick, it was great to I recorded his memory. Matty Morris recorded his memory for his family, for his grandkids, for his kids. And it's there for the test of time, mate. Like this, whether it's writing a book or like not everyone's going to write a book, but getting out and talking like this, doing what we're doing, it is a good process to, and reminisce on your career.
It is, and I totally agree. Those memories will be lost. One day we'll be old, God forbid, and gone, and the stories and the things we did right, maybe we did some things wrong, but if we can reflect on the good times and what we did right overseas and, the path that got us to here as Australia and as 2 Commando Regiment, if we don't tell them or document them somehow, they're gone and they're going to die with you, right?
Exactly.
Which will be a shame.
Exactly right. And as I said, mate, like for a long time I didn't even know what the Commandos did. Like it was, and it's great to get these. It's great to hear your stories, mate, of of the the build up to 2012, and like these are stories that people don't hear, mate, because you don't hear it because the guys would go, no, I'm quiet, and it's great, mate. Honestly, it is great for us to and to be proud of what you guys did over there. Like you went away to do a very, very tough job that 99% of us couldn't do, mate. So from all of us, we say thank you, mate, for the freedoms that you fought for us. And like we say, I'll go back to where we were at the start, where freedom's not free, mate. There's 42 guys and many more after that through the loss of suicide and all that sort of thing that have made the ultimate sacrifice for us to enjoy this freedom. So thank you, mate.
Yeah, thanks very much. I appreciate that, Adam. It means a lot, and you don't hear that very often. Like I've probably had separately maybe 6 or 7 times throughout the last 10 years, actually somebody stop and say, hey, listen, thank you for your service, you know, and you hear it all the time in America. In Australia, it doesn't seem to be said, or it's kind of assumed that, you know, you understand that, but it is actually nice to hear it. I've heard it from my son's teachers and just other random people that you meet who look you in the eye and give you a legitimate, hey, thanks for your service.
Yeah, 100%, mate.
So it isn't lost, and it's not cliche, and it is well accepted.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No,
thanks very
mate,
much.
no, you absolutely, and I mean that, you know, sincerely to you. And so, Muzz, what are your plans going into the future? Like, what family wise, and you mentioned your fiance. What are your plans going into the future?
Well, essentially to stay where we are. We're on a great piece of land. We've got a great view. We have a coffee outside in the morning and look at the hillside. We just want to enjoy that we'll have for the next 6 or 7 years, and then we might, you know, buy a piece of land for ourselves somewhere. But essentially, it's keep doing what I'm doing, keep digging holes in the ground and moving the cattle and patting the horses and just kicking around the farm doing stuff.
Yep.
Yeah, and we'll get married soon and see where life leads us. But at the moment, we're happier than we have been in a long time. And however that sounds, but it's like we're truly grounded and thankful for what we have and what Australia and the safety we got here and just being at one with nature. It's like I've turned into a kind of a fucking tree hugger. But like, you know, I love animals and yeah, true. I guess what I've done in the past, just scaling it back now and appreciating what I've got at the moment and what life is all about, I'm enjoying.
100%. No, mate, I get it, and I mean, you know, mate, someone who, you know, as I said to you, you know, I've just written my book on my life and my struggles, and mate, I get it. I often take my shoes and socks off and go and stand on the grass and just. And you know, and root myself again, like just ground myself to being, you know, just enjoying and breathing and you know, mate, I often say it to people because they ask me, you know, how did you change? And I, you know, people say, oh, that's hippie shit, like whatever you. But mate, they were onto something. They were absolutely, you know, peace and harmony, mate, peace and harmony, and I think what's going on in the world today. If we all just take a breath and just, you know, peace and harmony and ground yourself like you're saying, mate, the world would be a better place. It really would. And it's worked and helped with my mental health dramatically. And I am absolutely on to, like, I do yoga, I do, gratitude, gratefulness, and people are like, what the fuck? Like, what? Yeah, but it works, mate. It works for me. It doesn't work for everyone. But it's what's helped me, and like you say, I get it. I totally get what you're saying, and yeah, mate, exactly right.
Yeah, it is, and it wasn't cool to say that when you were younger, but at definitely my age now, it's like I don't give a fuck. I'm gonna say what makes me happy. I'm gonna call people out if they've done the wrong thing or I don't like them, or by the same thing. I'm quite happy now. Like I don't drink anymore, really. Like. One here and one there, but the nights of writing myself off and the next day sleeping all day are done. It's like I've missed nature, I've missed going outside.
Yep.
And time's important when you're at my age, and I just want to be happy. And like it's taken a full 180 now, and I'll say the shit now that's would have been uncool for me to say years ago.
Yeah, no, mate, I totally get it. I mean, drinking, mate. You. Mate, when you're 18 to, you know, I'd say 25 to 30, you sort of go, oh yeah, I can do that. I can do nights and nights and nights, and then, mate, like I'm turning 31 in a couple of weeks, and mate, I'm the same now. A couple of drinks and I'm done. I don't need to have a big night anymore because it takes a week to get over, mate.
It does, and like it's not good for your mental health. It's like there's a come down to the alcohol, right?
Yep.
And it's like I'm battling a hangover. And I'm battling some, you know, a downer, you know, for the scotch or the red wine, in my case, out of my body.
Yep.
And it hits me. And so there's like 2 days wasted that, you know, I don't have anymore.
Yeah, you're not going to get back.
No,
that's right. So, Muzz, just before we wrap up, what advice would you give to any young fella that's looking to go and do selection, and any advice and tips that you can give them?
That's a great point, and I mean, where do you start when you're talking about young people to be better? But dedicate yourself to something, and even if it's fitness, right, to start with, it may seem like a logical step and a no-brainer, but it's like push yourself at the gym, for instance. If I had to pick one. Push yourself at the gym and have the discipline to keep going back day after day, and do a swim or swim for a K at a pool on the weekend, and just keep doing it. Show up, and give it your best. There's so many things I could say to improve young people's lives, I feel, and they'd all roll their eyes, of course, at me. If anything I could say, it was get to the gym. Better yourself in the way that you can tomorrow, and if it's fitness, make it so.
Yep.
There's so many other ways that you can be better, and it's just be good at what you do generally, right? Even if it's, and I've spoken before about, just take pride in what you're doing, and particularly if you're working at a cafe, you're a barista, or you're pumping gas at the petrol station. Give it your best and do it 100%, because people see it, people take notice. And it's not your dream job, I understand that, but it's a leg up, and you might get noticed by somebody. You might get noticed by a millionaire or billionaire that's like, hey, good work ethic, come and work for me. Or it gives you money, it gives you pay to buy a better car, to drive to a better job, for instance, right?
Yep.
But I think people these days don't take enough pride in the small stuff.
Yeah. No, great advice, mate. So, knowing what you know now, Muzz, what advice would you give to your 18-year-old self, and would he listen?
I think he would listen. Like I wasn't ahead of myself at 18. I was still listening to my parents, and still, I think, doing the right things. To answer your question, I'm not sure what advice I could give myself. Like, I've really chosen a path that I wanted to do, whether it's selfish or not, chasing that adrenaline combat element that I was after. I got it. That's what I wanted to do, and I found it, and I'm satisfied. And I'm reflecting now on a life that I couldn't have chosen any better. There's no part of it that I would have changed. It's all got me to where I am right now, and I can, retire and sit back on the lawn and really be happy in my life choices. There's a few detours here and there, but I think it pushes you into a direction that ultimately when you stop, you're in a good place.
Yep. Yeah. No. Great advice, mate. And for you, mate, looking back now of your time in the 2nd Commando Regiment and losing the guys that you lost, how do you want Australia to remember the guys that made the ultimate sacrifice overseas fighting for our freedoms?
I'd just pick one point. I'd like everybody to know their names, right? I'm sick of, I guess, watching regular TV. We don't have a regular TV anymore. But what I'd like for the general person is to listen to more podcasts, watch less Netflix, understand what Australia's done and who we've lost in battle, defending Australia, without sounding cliche, defending our interests and our security and safety so we can all live this awesome lifestyle. Turn off Netflix and don't follow fucking Tom Cruise. Listen to this podcast, for instance, and understand, who our true warriors and heroes are, because they're not celebrities and they're not politicians.
No.
They're not actors. They're real people. And I've got so much respect for the plumber that fixes my house, or the mechanic that fixes my car, or the widow in the old folks' home down the road that, worked 3 jobs to raise her kids when her husband was killed in World War II. Like, they're the real stories. They're real people that have really impacted Australia. And I don't fall for the celebrity stardom bullshit. I don't buy into it. None of them impress me. So, yeah, long story short.
No, mate.
Yeah.
I think, mate, it's a great grounding to just stop and remember the people that have gone before us, and as we said throughout the podcast, mate, is that remember their sacrifice.
That's
Their sacrifice is, there's now over 103,000 names that are on the, the walls of Canberra on the, the honour roll. There's 103,000 families that have suffered for us to enjoy the freedom that we enjoy. And I think you're right, mate. No, I absolutely agree with you. I think these days we get caught up in too much of the bullshit that, we get caught in the, trying to be like the Joneses and all that bullshit that, mate, all the material bullshit that means nothing, and we need to get back to our grassroots of, connection, love, and compassion and helping people. And 100%, mate, really great point you touch on there, Muzz.
Yeah, thanks, mate. I appreciate that.
So,
Yeah.
for you, Muzz, and we'll finish up in a minute, but for you, was joining the army still the best decision you ever made? And also then going on to do Special Forces selection, was that still the greatest, still a great decision for you in looking back now?
Oh, absolutely. That path and the 4 years I spent in regular army was just what I needed. I needed that motivation. I needed to understand how regular army operated, and that essentially at that point in time, I didn't want to be a part of it. I wanted something more. So yeah, that worked out well. That was my motivation to pass. I didn't want to go back to Townsville. I didn't want to go back and see the RSM that pretty much spat on me when I left because he was disgusted that I would leave his unit, that he was driving into the side of a hill at 100 clicks an hour, and people were leaving left, right and centre to get out. But I wouldn't change a thing. Everything was motivation for me to improve or to be better, or to pass selection, to not go back to Townsville.
And mate, you had a stellar career, and yeah, thank God you didn't. Thank God you passed, mate, and got to have the career you had. And Muzz, there's a quote that I want to finish with, but how do people get in contact with you?
So good point. I've got an Instagram that I raised a couple of months ago that hasn't got much on it, but I'm going to start posting because of the book.
Yep.
And start raising its profile a little bit and putting snippets here and there and generate some momentum for that. So that's Muzz Tactical 2022. So I obviously put that together last year at lastminute.com. So MUZ Tactical 2022. And I'll start putting more stuff on there, but anybody can reach out to me on that Instagram handle. Is that what they call them?
Yeah, handle. Yep.
So anybody can reach out. I'm happy to answer any questions, and that'll be the platform for the book when it comes out.
Yeah, nice. And mate, I look forward to reading it mate, it's going to be a ripper of a read, and I'm excited to read it. And Muzz, you've served your country with honour, and you've brought pride to your family. Your story is one of true grit, determination, having the courage to be brave and test yourself. Now, there's a quote that I really believe sums you up, and I'd like to share that with you. A true leader has the confidence to stand alone, the courage to make tough decisions, and the compassion to listen to the needs of others. He does not set out to be a leader, but becomes one by the equality of his actions and the integrity of his intent. Muzz, I believe this sums your story up and who you are as a person. I want to thank you for your service to our country, and I want to thank you for the work you do for veterans, first responders, and many others who are struggling with mental health. I appreciate you coming on True Blue Conversations and sharing your story. It's been an absolute honour and a privilege to have you on. Thanks, Muzz.
Thanks very much, Adam. It was a privilege to drive up here and to follow you and see your platform and how well it's doing. And I want to take my hat off to people like you who are dedicated to highlighting stories and getting people that would not necessarily come forward to come on and share their stories. I think it's great.
Thank you for tuning into this episode of True Blue Conversations with your host, Adam Bloom. See you on the front line.